and welcome. I'm Pip Tomson and you are watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Joe Biden publicly pardons son Hunter Biden of his federal convictions in one of his final acts as US president. Syrian and Russian air forces strike back on opposition groups making claims on Aleppo. And the president of Georgia speaks out against the Georgian government following days of protests on the streets of Tbilisi. To the United States first, and US President Joe Biden is facing criticism after pardoning his son Hunter for tax violations and gun-related charges. Presidents often issue pardons before they leave office, but Biden had repeatedly said he was not planning to grant his son clemency, as Nick Harper reports from Washington.
There was this.
And I will not pardon him.
And this.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes.
And this from the White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre.
Is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No.
But now this. A full and unconditional pardon for Hunter Biden from his father, the US President Joe Biden. In a statement, Biden said his son had faced years of unrelenting attacks and selective prosecution, accusations Hunter Biden himself had railed against.
There is no fairness or decency in what these Republicans are doing. They have lied over and over about every aspect of my personal and professional life.
The pardon wipes away tax evasion charges Hunter Biden pleaded guilty to in September and overturns his conviction for buying a gun while he was addicted to drugs. He was due to be sentenced in both cases later this month. Incoming President Donald Trump has reacted angrily, calling the move an abuse and miscarriage of justice. And some lawmakers in the president's own party have labelled the decision wrong, saying they are disappointed. However, using presidential pardon to protect family and friends is not uncommon. Bill Clinton pardoned his half-brother for drugs charges, and Donald Trump granted clemency to associates and his daughter's father-in-law, Charles Kushner, the man Trump has now picked to be the next US ambassador to France. But President Biden is facing accusations of hypocrisy for breaking his own promise not to interfere in his son's legal proceedings. And the pardon also raises questions about the strength of the US justice system, which could be tested further when Donald Trump returns to the White House. President-elect Trump has hinted he could pardon hundreds of his supporters who were jailed for storming the US Capitol on January the 6th, 2021. And he suggested he'll use the Justice Department to target political opponents. Biden says he hopes Americans will understand his decision, but it's a decision which could set a presidential precedent that sometimes some people are above the law. Nick Harper, Al Arabiya News, Washington.
Let's talk about this a little bit more now with our correspondent Caroline Malone, who's in Washington. Hello to you, Caroline. President Biden, as we've been saying, repeatedly claimed he would not pardon his son. So what exactly has changed?
Well, it seems at this time that President Biden is well aware that he has just over a month left in office and he's clearly not running for president again. He has no political ambitions left for the first time in his life. And so therefore, he's chosen this time to completely pardon his son, Hunter Biden. It's not uncommon for presidents to pardon people that are close to them or even people that they think should be pardoned on more philosophical reasons. But Hunter Biden in particular is someone who has openly had a substance abuse problem. Over about 5 years, there were a number number of cases that were brought against him. This tax evasion and gun charges are among the most serious of them. And he could have faced something up to 25 years in prison, perhaps less, though, with the sentencing. And clearly, President Joe Biden has decided at this time, although he's said openly that he feels like they're unfair cases brought against his son because of bias, because they were trying to target him, because they were trying to quote, break his son, Hunter Biden. Clearly, he's decided that it's not fair, it's not justice. And even in the statement, he pointed out that he hopes people will understand because Hunter Biden is his son. Clearly, he's acted somewhat here because, his son is clearly a loved one to him. Donald Trump has obviously criticised this, many in his future administration, saying that there is, a hypocrisy here ultimately. President Biden saying up until just recently, and those in the White House as well, that his son, Hunter Biden, would not be pardoned, that no one is above the law. That was a sort of phrase we heard a lot during the campaigning, particularly earlier in 2024, when the Democrats were criticizing Donald Trump. And Donald Trump at that time had 4 huge cases against him, which whittled down eventually to just 1 case, but saying no one is above the law and then clearly acting completely in a contradiction to that by pardoning his own son is quite profound at this time. There's a lot of precedents for it, though, I should mention. Previous presidents, for instance, Bill Clinton, we heard there from Nick Harper, pardoned his own brother on drug charges. We know that President Obama as well actually provided pardons and leniency, so reducing sentences for nearly 2,000 people during his 8 years in office. Those were mainly people who'd been charged on drug charges, on fraud charges, and also people that had been given sentences for abandoning and not contributing to the military campaign in the Vietnam War. So, in that case, I guess you could see it as being somewhat philosophical rather than for people to close to him, relatives or political benefits. Now, Trump, on the other hand, when he was in office, he did provide pardons to about 240 people. And that does include people that are close to him. That does include relatives. That does include potential political benefit, including, for instance, the father of his son-in-law, Charles Kushner. And Trump in recent days didn't just pardon him in his last time in office. He's now nominated Charles Kushner to be the next US ambassador to France. So clearly, acting in the interest of his family and those that he perceives to be loyal to him.
OK, Caroline Malone in Washington, thanks very much for talking to us. To the Middle East now, and Syrian and Russian forces are targeting opposition groups in the Aleppo countryside after the group claimed to have entered the city of Hama at the weekend. Syria's opposition-run rescue service, the White Helmets, say at least 25 people, including 10 children, have died in the strikes. Meanwhile, Iran-backed militia have entered Syria from Iraq to bolster the Syrian army. The Kremlin say Russia continues to support Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, and the Turkish foreign minister has also pledged his allegiance. I can now speak to the conflict researcher and journalist Thomas van Linger. Thanks very much for talking to me, Thomas. Good to see you. The armed opposition group leading this new offensive is now moving towards Hama after taking Aleppo in recent days. Can you explain to us, and I think there's a map that you could possibly talk over, explain to us the significance of Hama and what the latest is there on that front?
Yeah, so after taking Aleppo, the second largest city in the country, Hama is basically the next big prize for the rebels on their road to Damascus. The highway from Aleppo to Damascus basically goes through first Hama and then the city of Homs. Rebels briefly managed to enter Hama on Saturday night before they were pushed out again by the regime. And now they're trying to do the same thing in Hama that they did in Aleppo. So first try to approach the city from the countryside, from different directions. And then once they see an opportunity to re-enter the city again and possibly re-establish control.
The Syrian army have bolstered their forces around and inside Hama. How successful has this been in terms of stalling the offensive launched by opposition armed groups? And will this help in any way to regain territory that's been lost in recent days?
Well, I think what we're seeing now is that both sides are still establishing their forces for the next round of fighting. We have to keep in mind that the rebels themselves are exceeding beyond all expectations. They never expect that they would take Aleppo in a day and that they could even be threatening Hama 3 or 4 days after their offensive started. So they had a bit of a strategic overreach where they suddenly could enter Hama unchallenged and then found that there were still regime forces there. So while both sides are now sort of scrambling to gather their forces for the next fight, we can see that the regime is calling on its allies, like the Russians and the Iranians and Iraqi militant groups, in order to reinforce the lines again. It should be noted that the chairman of the Hashd al-Shabi, the Iraqi Shia militias, has openly denied that his forces have re-entered Syria again to join the front lines. So if they are present in Syria, then they're not doing it openly yet. But if the reports are true that they are indeed in Syria, then that means for the rebels that it's now a race against the clock to take as much territory as they can before the regime forces can rally again, stabilize the front lines and think about a possible counteroffensive.
As you alluded to there, the Syrian government needs Russia and Iran's support, but both of those countries have been somewhat distracted, haven't they? So what kind of support can they actually provide? Will it be enough?
Well, it will be very limited, of course. I mean, Russia is forced to use all its resources in Ukraine to take small bits of territory one day at a time, and can't really be distracted now by any other theaters of war around the world. So their foothold in Syria has basically paid a price for that. The Iranians, on the other hand, have really suffered a lot of setbacks because of repeated Israeli airstrikes on their military positions. Even their embassy in Damascus got hit a couple months ago. So even though the Iranians are still present in Syria, their freedom of movement and their fighting capabilities have been severely limited by repeated Israeli attacks. So both those allies are now in a tough position where they would like to help the Assad regime, but can't really spare that much resources yet.
Thomas, are there any signs to indicate that opposition groups loyal to Turkey could be preparing to launch an offensive on territories held by the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces in places such as Manbij, for example?
Well, there was one video that came out just a couple hours ago of a number of Turkish-aligned opposition forces that stated that they would go to Manbij. So basically what we're seeing now is that everyone is scrambling their forces, their arms, and trying to take as much territory as they can. So, of course, the Turkish-aligned rebel forces will also try to see if they can take Manbij. I do expect that the Kurds won't surrender that territory as easily as the Assad regime had done. And if it turns out to be a costly battle, then at some point the Turkish-aligned rebels might decide to withdraw for the moment. So there will definitely be some clash between those sides, but whether we can see a sweeping rebel offensive against the Kurds is still very much a question.
Thomas van Linger, conflict researcher and journalist, really appreciate your analysis on Al Arabiya News this evening. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you so much.
To Georgia now, where there has been further unrest in the region with 4 consecutive nights of demonstrations. Thousands have taken to the streets in Tbilisi with fireworks aimed at police after the ruling party's decision to suspend talks on joining the European Union. The Prime Minister has rejected calls for new elections despite a string of resignations, including Georgia's ambassador to the US. We can go live to our reporter, William Denzelo, who is in Brussels for us. Good to see you, William. All the signs are that this unrest is now spreading beyond the capital. What are the protesters saying?
That's absolutely right. You mentioned 4 nights of protests. On Saturday evening alone, it's estimated that more than 100,000 people took to the streets. Essentially, many people that have been protesting are warning that their hopes of joining the European Union are essentially slipping away as Georgia moves away from the EU's orbit and towards Russia's orbit. Polling suggests that roughly 80% or so of the population is in favour of an EU accession. So many people see that their voices are not being represented. Many, of course, are incredibly unhappy with the outcome of October's parliamentary elections that saw a win for the ruling Georgia Dream Party. Many of these protesters, including the country's president, say that the elections were unfair and are demanding a recount. The EU itself has said that they're waiting for the results of an independent analysis of those elections as well.
Among the arrests, I understand, is the Georgian opposition leader. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, this comes at an incredibly heightened time of tension in Georgia, and especially with the fact that so many political leaders are so loudly speaking on both sides of the camp. The Georgia Dream, for example, have accused the opposition of lies. Georgia's president has said much the same on the other side of the debate. Of course, a huge proponent of joining the EU. And when it comes to elected officials here in Brussels, well, we've heard from Kaja Kallas, who's just been in the role as the EU's top diplomat, the foreign affairs chief, for just a couple of days now. She's come out and says that she regrets the signals from Georgian authorities not to pursue a path to the EU, also accusing the country of democratic backsliding. So touching on that point that you made about the concerns that the EU has about these protests, how they're being handled. Kaja Kallas also issuing a warning to Tbilisi, saying that what we've been seeing as a result of Georgia's Dream's action, she says, will have direct consequences. Pressed on that by journalists here at the European Commission about what those consequences might be. The press pool telling us that we'll have to wait to the European Council meeting a little later this month, where that issue of consequences will be very much up for discussion.
And just briefly, William, while I've got you, can we just talk about France? Because the French Prime Minister, he's facing a no-confidence vote after apparently forcing through a budget.
That's absolutely right. Well, it's been since September that Michel Barnier has been in the role of Prime Minister. He's been in control of a minority government, so his position has certainly been precarious since the elections over the summer in France, to say the very least. He made the move to push forward the social security budget without going to Parliament for this vote, therefore triggering a no-confidence vote that could come as early as Wednesday. Both the far right and far left have said they will like to go forward with that option. If Michel Barnier loses that no-confidence vote, it'll be the first time since the 1960s that a Prime Minister has essentially lost his job as a result of a vote of no confidence.
William Denslow in Brussels, thank you. You're with W News. Time to have a look at the other stories making headlines around the world. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has pledged a further €650 million worth of military equipment to Ukraine. Scholz is in Kyiv today. It's the German leader's first visit to the Ukrainian capital in more than 2.5 years. Writing on X, Scholz said that Germany would remain Ukraine's strongest supporter in Europe. Romania's current governing party, the Social Democratic Party, looks set to keep its majority in parliament following the country's general election at the weekend. There was relief from centrist and left-leaning members after a far-right candidate, Călin Georgescu, appeared to claim victory in the first round last week. Elton John has revealed he's lost his eyesight whilst attending the gala performance of the stage adaptation of The Devil Wears Prada. Speaking in London, the global entertainer told the West End crowd he was unable to watch the show he wrote the music for, but enjoyed listening to it. The musician has been struggling with his eyesight ever since battling an infection last summer. The Australian actor Ian Smith, best known for playing Harold Bishop in Neighbours, has announced he's been diagnosed with terminal cancer. The 85-year-old, who first appeared on the soap in 1987, is suffering with a rare form of lung cancer. Neighbours has spawned the careers of many Hollywood A-listers like Margot Robbie, Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce. And brain rot has been picked as the Oxford Dictionary's 2024 Word of the Year. It was chosen after gaining 37,000 votes, and according to Oxford University Press, is the supposed deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state, which can be a result of overconsumption of material considered to be trivial or unchallenging. Let's bring you a bit of business news. And thousands of workers at Volkswagen plants across Germany went on strike today, bringing assembly lines to a standstill. Thousands gathered at the car makers' headquarters in Wolfsburg, with demonstrations also taking place at the Hanover plant. The strikes, which could escalate if a deal is not struck soon, are likely to damage the car makers' plunging profits even further. Staying with motoring, and Vauxhall's parent company Stellantis has lost around €2.95 billion in value. It comes as the company's chief executive resigns, days after the car maker's factory in Luton was announced for closure. The firm, which also makes Jeep, Fiat and Peugeot, has lost around 40% of its share value this year, with most of the losses coming from the North American market. Moving on to sport, and McLaren have called for an investigation after their driver, Lando Norris, was penalised for ignoring yellow flags during the Qatar Grand Prix. McLaren say the severe decision lacked any proportion and affected Norris's finishing place ahead of the final race in Abu Dhabi this weekend. And Fiorentina midfielder Eduardo Bove is currently awake, alert and orientated in hospital after collapsing during a match against Inter Milan on Sunday. The match was suspended and later abandoned after the 22-year-old Italian footballer suddenly fell to the ground. He was later put into a medically induced coma. At least 56 people are feared dead after clashes broke out at a football match in southeast Guinea. It's believed violence erupted over a contested goal between Labi and Inzakori. An inquiry has been launched into the incident, while the Prime Minister, Uri Bar, has called the events tragic and offered his condolences. We can speak to our correspondent in Ghana, Nabil Ahmed. Nabil, hello to you. Tell us then, how did all this happen? Such a tragedy.
Well, two football teams in Guinea played a match on Sunday and in honor of the military leader Mamadou Doumbouya. Now, during the course of the game, the referee awarded a penalty to one of the football team, and they went ahead to score a goal, and that really infuriated the other opponents, and the football fans there decided to hurl stones on the pitch, and it resulted in clashes among the football fans. Now, the police who had stationed there in their quest to calm the situation decided to fire tear gas into the crowd, and then that actually escalated the whole chaos at the stadium and resulted in a stampede. And that is what's really resulted in dozens of deaths in Guinea over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking now at some of the pictures, completely chaotic there. Can you give us any more information about the number of people who've died and the number of those injured as well?
We are learning that at least 56 people have died as a result of the stampede that occurred on Sunday. at the stadium, and many others are also injured. We do not know the figure as yet, but we know that those who have died also include children, and some of them who are also injured are responding to treatment in hospitals in the country.
What have officials been saying in the aftermath of this, Nabil?
Well, on Monday, the officials have actually released a statement condemning the incident that happened at the stadium on Sunday. They've actually sent their condolences to the bereaved family, and they've assured them that they'll be investigating the circumstances that led to the deaths, and those who really are found culpable of really causing the whole stampede, they would be brought before the law to face justice.
Nabil Ahmed in Ghana, thank you very much for bringing us that update on W News. Let's bring you a reminder of our top stories. Joe Biden publicly pardons his son Hunter of his federal convictions in one of his final acts as US president. Syrian and Russian air forces strike back on opposition groups making claims on Aleppo. And the president of Georgia speaks out against the Georgian government after days of protests on the streets of Tbilisi. And that's just about it from me and the team here on W News. Thanks so much for joining us. Tom Burges Watson joins you next with GNT. From all of us here, a very good night.
Hello and welcome. I'm Riz Khan. 1 million dead or wounded. That's the figure reported by the Wall Street Journal as an estimate of the total number of casualties suffered by both sides on the battlefield during 1,000 days of war between Russia and Ukraine. Well, amid changes in the leadership of both the US government and the NATO military alliance, the milestone was reached at a time of uncertainty. In the days which followed, a spiral of escalatory claims and counterclaims fueled the fears of a global nuclear conflict. Russia has threatened to use its new hypersonic missiles against Ukrainian decision-making centers. A newly unleashed Ukraine continues to make use of American and European long-range missiles inside Russia. Both sides are now maneuvering for position ahead of January the 20th, when a new president, armed with his peace plan, enters the White House. And Donald Trump's appointment of his special envoy for Ukraine and Russia completes the team sheet of names that he wants to help him end the conflict. In this episode, I'll speak with influential voices from both Russia and Ukraine. But my first guest looks after military matters in the Baltic state of Latvia. Andris Spruds is the defense minister of a nation that's a NATO member, whose government is a prominent voice in support of Ukraine and shares a border with Russia. And he's spoken in support of extending conscription for women in the years ahead. Minister, it's good to have you on the show. Let me start by asking, what is Latvia's response to the fast-moving developments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
Yes, thank you for having me. What we see, of course, it is a continuous brutality of Russian forces. What we see also, of course, intimidation by Russian forces and by Russian posture. So, of course, it once more underlines importance of NATO, the Western community, global community supporting Ukraine. Because if we don't support Ukraine right now, the costs will be higher in the future.
Do you think the cycle of escalation has moved the world any closer to nuclear war than at any point in recent time?
We see escalation. We see additional blackmailing. We see additional nuclear rhetoric as well, I would say, unfortunately. Of course, it also demonstrates the fragility and challenges of the global security order. And also we see that there are authoritarian revisionist countries which are exactly using that kind of rhetoric. At the same time, I would not overestimate the scenario when nuclear Armageddon can take place. I still believe that there is some common sense. There is very clear signals also from NATO side. NATO is a nuclear alliance. Consequences would be extremely high, and I would say, first of all, extremely high for those countries and those authoritarian leaders which are using that kind of blackmailing.
The Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said there's a real risk of global conflict, especially now that Iran and North Korea are more involved. Do you share this assessment, and what concern is there that Latvia could become a frontline, considering it shares a 300-kilometer border with Russia?
We see turmoil in the global security order. Of course, it concerns us. I think it concerns everyone who is interested in stability, who is interested in rules-based international order, in sovereignty of nations. So that's why, of course, there are a lot of concerns, what we see around the globe. And in those kind of circumstances, certainly some of the countries appear are willing somehow to become revisionist countries. And again, this is very unfortunate for all of us, and especially also for those revisionist countries themselves. As for Latvia, we are part of the most successful defensive alliance. It is not about security of Latvia, because we must remember Latvia is part of NATO, which means that security of Latvia is also security of NATO. There is one NATO. And in this regard, of course, we are all doing the necessary homework nationally, but of course also together with our international partners, our international allies within NATO alliance, which is defensive alliance, which is ready to defend, which is ready to deter, which is ready, of course, to support also the countries which fight for its freedom and rules-based international order.
Germany has drawn up a list of bunkers to protect its citizens in the case of any attack. Apart from NATO membership, as you were discussing, what steps has Latvia taken to help protect its citizens?
Well, we are ready for different kind of hybrid activities. We already see the hybrid warfare for some time, so this is nothing new for us. The weaponization of illegal migration, cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, incidents against critical infrastructure. That's why, of course, we as society must be ready for different kind of scenarios. And I absolutely can underline, we are ready. We are ready in society, on societal level, we are ready among institutions. And of course, we cooperate closely with our allies, with also institutions from our partner countries. Of course, this is a important work which should be done nationally, but also in a joint effort to preclude from any kind of negative scenarios, any kind of sabotage and hybrid warfare activities from our adversaries.
Why did Latvia reintroduce military service for men last year, and what's been the response to your suggestion that women also might be conscripted at some point soon?
Yes, we reintroduced conscription. It was supported widely by society. We realize that if we discuss, and not only discuss, but if we implement comprehensive defense approach, everybody is involved in comprehensive defense approach. And this is also a position of our neighboring countries. We see conscription all around the region. And this actually also refers to the question of women. Women are part of course, part of the comprehensive defense. Every individual, every human being also in Latvia, of course, contributes to our defensive abilities. And we see example here in Sweden, Norway, Denmark recently also introduced compulsory service for women. So here, absolutely, we underline importance of comprehensive defense. I would say the Baltic Nordic regional model, and also the, of course, equality of rights and responsibilities for all genders.
There is a fear among some in the Baltic states and other former Soviet nations that Russia is trying to create a split within each country between those citizens of Russian origin and the rest of the population, and even among politicians who are pro-Russian or anti-Russian. What chance is there Russia could create that kind of division in your country?
Well, of course, Russia can attempt and try different kind of means and measures to split and to divide. And I think this has been part of the Russian hybrid activities, again, for years. Of course, we are a democratic country, which means that there is diversity of opinions, diversity of political parties as well. And we are proud of it, that we have this diversity. At the same time, on the fundamental issues, sovereignty, freedom, democracy, supporting Ukraine, there is no split in Latvian society. Yes, there is some legacy of the Soviet Empire. Unfortunately, there are some minority groups within society which sometimes seems to be still living in the past, it could be acknowledged, but absolute wide majority among Latvia's population, including Russian-speaking population, are loyal, patriotic, supportive of NATO, supportive of course, of being a member of European Union, and also supporting Ukraine.
European officials are investigating what they believe is sabotage of underwater cables in the Baltic Sea, including a connection between Lithuania and Sweden and Finland and Germany. What information are you getting about this issue and what's being described as a hybrid warfare being waged by Russia against the West? What can you do to avoid something similar affecting Latvia?
There is hybrid warfare in the region. Absolutely, this is without any doubt. And Russia wages this hybrid warfare activity. I would be a bit more careful exactly specifically on this incident, because still some investigation must be completed to make specific already the conclusions. But yes, we are partly facing those challenges of defending, protecting our critical infrastructure. It's not easy, let's be again straightforward, because we see cables hundreds of kilometers, and you cannot keep the warship above every cable, every place. This is of course also understandable, but additional monitoring, additional cooperation among institutions, additional flag appearance, also showing the NATO presence in the region. Also, of course, additionally adding warships and patrolling. This, of course, has been done and must be done. And of course, additional monitoring is certainly the key response to this.
I presume that's in response to Britain's warning that Russia is preparing to use cyber attacks on critical infrastructure against European nations supporting Ukraine in this conflict.
You are absolutely right. We've been facing cyber attacks again for years. 3 Baltic countries, if we look at some specific cyber attacks, 30%, almost 1/3 of cyber attacks against European Union, they are targeting exactly 3 Baltic countries. So we already built a strong wall of resilience against cyber attacks, but it is an ongoing process. It is ongoing homework to improve our resilience, to improve our reaction time, to improve our, in a sense, the wall against any such kind of detrimental activities by Russia. And it should be put straightforwardly, by Russia first of all.
Now, Minister, NATO's leading military officer, Admiral Rob Bauer, has warned European businesses that they have a role to play in preparing for a wartime scenario. Is that the case in Latvia too?
Yes, in Latvia, absolutely. We are much more ready, I guess, as some other countries, but I would still say the glass is half full rather than half empty. I think there is this understanding what takes place in Ukraine. It has a real dire and long-term consequences. That it means also adjustment and readjustment how we deal with Russia. So we cannot come back to some kind of business as usual or business as previous. It also means that we need certainly to actively cooperate and enhance our military industry. Also, businesses have critical role to play here, and they are playing this role, including in Latvia. We are very strong, of course, putting emphasis on our own military industry, which involves the business community. But it's not only about military industry, it's in general. So that, of course, we must reorient any connections with countries which can use economic tool as a political and strategic tool of intimidation and pressure. Of course, this should be taken care of.
Now, Minister, this week there was a fatal plane crash in your neighbour, Lithuania, and there are suspicions of Russian sabotage. What do you know about that?
Well, again, so there are specific investigation procedures. I would not rush with pre-assumptions or speculations on this. But of course, once more, it underlines how important it is to protect all domains of our life, be it in the sea, be it in the air. So it is once more underlining the importance of resilience, importance of readiness, importance of understanding what we are facing, that we should be ready for different scenarios, and also very importantly, that we should strongly communicate with our societies and explain as much as possible to keep the safety and security feeling always present, even though realizing that we live in quite insecure and challenging times.
Minister, I wonder what impact the potential threat from Russia has had on bolstering collaboration between European nations that share a border with Russia, such as yours.
Absolutely. It has bolstered cooperation. We've seen also, of course, and we very much welcome the NATO membership for Sweden and Finland. which means also that the region is much more strongly interconnected in terms of military, in terms of economic, political cooperation, even though it was strong already before. But common adversary or understanding of strategically common threat, it is always unifying countries for all of us. Being, in many ways on the front line with Russia means that we have to strengthen our defense lines. We should cooperate. We should build a shield on a border. We should defend every inch of NATO territory, and every inch of NATO territory starts exactly in our countries. And that's why also mutual cooperation among us is instrumental, very important, and is also developing.
Well, there's an unusual situation in your region, Minister, and that's the issue of the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad, a small territory on the Baltic, cut off from Russia, surrounded by Poland and Lithuania, and requiring access through Lithuania, Latvia or Belarus to reach the Russian border. And there have been tensions since Lithuania announced it would halt the transport of EU-sanctioned goods coming from Russia en route to Kaliningrad. What are the potential consequences of this move?
Well, of course, this should be still discussed. I guess it also once more underlines that Russia has its vulnerabilities. Naturally, Kaliningrad is also its, or Kaliningrad enclave or oblast region. It is a vulnerability also strategically for Russia. And it should be always reminded to Russia as well that also for Russia to somehow to have constructive relationships with its neighbors, it is in their long-term interests. So that's why, of course, it is also the Lithuania's decision. It is also, of course, a common decision within the European Union. But I believe that if Lithuania decides that there are security concerns and security risks due to this transit, then I would assume there is an absolute legitimate right to exactly make such kind of relevant decisions.
Now, Ukraine was recently given the green light by the United States, the UK and France to strike military targets further inside Russia. Was this a necessary step in your view?
It was necessary. We welcome that decision. Latvia, of course, also supports Ukraine strongly, once more also because of those reasons that this is about a long-term consequences for the global security, about rules-based international order. And if Ukrainian people are being hit by Russian rockets, by Russian missiles, and Ukraine cannot respond, of course, this is not a right situation. So we absolutely believe that this is the right for Ukraine to defend itself, against Russian aggression, to protect its people, and to destroy legitimate military targets, the basis from which those attacks against Ukrainian civilians are being targeted. So that's why, yes, Latvia supports it and welcomes, and actually invites even to do more and more speedily, with a more sense of urgency. This has been done, but it could have been done. That kind of decision could have been taken even earlier. Latvia itself, of course, supplies also Ukraine with weapons. It supplies also with training. Latvia is also co-leading with UK in a drone coalition, which is, of course, also very important in the new technology war. And we will be continuously supporting Ukraine with 0.25% from our GDP exactly for military expenditures, military support.
Well, now, Russia responded by using its new Oreshnik intermediary-range hypersonic missile, and President Putin said that was a warning to the West. What message did you take from this?
This is a brutal intimidation. It is an intimidation by Russia. This is Russian traditional approach. If something is not according to Russia's plans, so it starts to intimidate its neighbors and starts to intimidate, other nations. So, of course, in this situation, this once more just underlines importance of Ukraine being allowed to target legitimate targets in Russia and supporting Ukraine constantly, because, intimidation must not be prevailing in international relations among sovereign nations.
Will these weapons systems have a significant impact on altering the current situation, where Ukraine's been losing territory that it holds in Russia's Kursk region, while Russians have been steadily gaining ground in the east of the country?
Well, every day is decisive in Ukraine's fight for its freedom. And of course, let's not immediately fall into the traps that everything is going bad. Of course, we can realize that there are a lot of challenges and difficulties. There is sort of, if we may say, Russia's advantage to absolute disregard for human life, also disregard for its own soldiers' human life. But at the same time, exactly because of those reasons, because of that intimidation, Ukraine must be given all weapons to protect itself, also hitting legitimate targets on Russian soil.
Just a final thought, Minister. Eyes are turning to the USA, where the incoming Trump administration says it wants some kind of peace deal. And very recently, Michael Waltz, Donald Trump's nominee for National Security Advisor, said the war needs to come to a, quote, responsible end. And the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, has also said that he wants a fair deal. What do you think a responsible and fair deal looks like, and what compromises have to be made in order to reach it?
Exactly. All of us would like to see the peace in our region, and of course not people dying because of some imperialistic ambitions. That's why we also welcome that there is, of course, aspiration for a deal. But once more, it is important that the deal has been achieved from positions of strength. So we must jointly speak and act from positions of strength. This is crucial. And as Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, has said, yes, exactly, it must be a fair and just deal, which means that it must be the deal defined above all also by Ukraine. It cannot be a deal which is imposed on Ukraine. So Ukrainian people fight for their freedoms. They've been supported, rightly so. They fight in many ways for freedom and values for all of us. And that's why, of course, this fair and just deal is above all defined by Ukrainian side. Liberating territories, the war criminals paying also, let us say, the responsibilities for what has been done. So, of course, this would be a fair deal for Ukrainian people. But above all, it is Ukrainian nation decides what is fair and just deal. So nothing should be made without also consent of Ukrainian.
Well, Minister Andris Spruds, thank you very much for making the time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So how's all this being viewed from Moscow? Let's get a perspective from the Russian Member of Parliament, Evgeny Popov. He also presents the popular primetime current affairs show 60 Minutes that airs on the state-owned Russia One network. Evgeny, good to have you back on the show. Now, following the recent developments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, both the green light given to Ukraine to strike inside Russia and, of course, the Kremlin's response with the use of new hypersonic missiles, how much closer is the world to nuclear war?
I thank you for giving me a floor, and I don't think we are pretty close to the full-scale nuclear war, because it's many steps away in forward on a stair of escalation, and we just going up on the stair step by step to the nuclear war. But I don't think that we have that there are much insane politics in Europe and in the United States, which want to be blown up in a nuclear war. And that's why I think we are closer to the negotiations than to the nuclear war.
I'll touch on that a little bit as the show goes on, but President Putin suggested the use of this new Oreshnik missile was a warning to the West. What do you think will happen if the West doesn't listen to this warning?
It's hard to say for me, because I'm not a guy from military Ministry of Defense, but I think it was important warning from Russia to any countries who thinks that we're not going to respond to the escalations. It was a signal to the West, to Washington, to London, to Paris, which is already using their missiles against historically Russian territory. It was hard signal. And I think it was it being heard in Western capitals, but I don't think that Ukraine and Washington will stop using the missiles against our territory. But on every step which Washington or this lame duck administration will do, we have responded. But it's better for us to be on a table, on a table of negotiations rather than using new type of weapon.
Well, with someone of your senior position and contacts, I know you follow things closely and are party to a lot of information. I wonder, from that perspective, do you see such weapons being used to strike US bases in Poland or military targets on the French or British soil for their supplying of Storm Shadow and Scalp missiles if things escalate?
I think it depends of targets inside Russia territory. And I think it depends of, unfortunately, insane administration in Washington, D.C. right now. Of course, we can attack in response some Western military bases, but it would be historical decision, I would say, because right now we are already at war with NATO countries, with some part of NATO. We are at war with France, we are at war with Great Britain, and we are at war with the United States. Because they are using their missiles, long-range missiles, against our constitutional and historic territory. But I can't say you, would we use our long-range missiles against the Western military bases? If we will have no choice, of course we will do it. But I don't think what will be this step different with full-scale nuclear conflict, because it would be World War III, and World War III would be will be, of course, nuclear war, and no one will left on this planet, maybe. I don't know.
Evgeny, on your popular TV show, you've indicated a doomsday scenario to show how Russian nuclear weapons would be able to obliterate European cities and civilization with just a few missiles. And of course, Russian cities are also vulnerable to the same fate from Western nuclear weapons. Do people in Russia share Western fears of a nuclear escalation, or do they find reassurance in the nuclear deterrent?
You know, Russian people has just one goal: security guarantees, and we will get it on the battlefield or during negotiations. But right now, it's a dangerous phase of the conflict, because just a few red lines ahead, which is the West didn't cancel or didn't destroy. Of course, every people on this planet scared or afraid of nuclear war, because I'm sure that it will be no winner in any kind of nuclear conflict. That's why there aren't insane politicians in Russia which is wanted to use some nuclear missile against Western countries. But right now, we don't have a choice choice than respond mirror, like a mirror. If you use long-range missile against our territory, what should we do? It's a difficult question, and I don't know exact answer on it. But if the United States using a long-range missile, American long-range missile against our territory, should we use Russians long-range missiles against U.S. territory? If you thinking by logic, yes, we can use it, but I don't think it will happen in nearest future.
Well, you know, Evgeny, President Putin has threatened to use nuclear weapons on multiple occasions, but throughout the conflict. But some have dismissed these as empty threats and empty remarks because it would increase the risk of Armageddon for both sides. And why would any world leader choose to inflict that on his own people?
You know, Riz, I would ask you, don't live in a world of myths. President Putin never threatened to anybody with a nuclear weapon. We've never threatened to use our nuclear weapon against any countries. We have a doctrine which is allow us to use our nuclear weapon in response of using nuclear weapon against our territory. Or if we have huge threat to our sovereignty, to our freedoms, to our state, that's it. We can't threat anybody to use a nuclear weapon first, you know? And that's why it's a hard decision, and we're thinking for a long time how to respond, because it's so dangerous right now. We are really live in the most dangerous time ever, I think. It's more dangerous than Caribbean crisis. It's more dangerous than I don't know, World War I.
Right. You know, Evgeny, you make an interesting point about the use of language, and you know the word escalation is being used by both sides to justify new developments in the war. Now, President Putin described America's permission to use longer-distance missiles as an escalation, which justifies, of course, his response in changing nuclear protocols and firing the hypersonic missile. But then the West has cited Russia's attacks on civilian infrastructure, its use of Iranian drones, North Korean missiles, and now thousands of North Korean troops as examples of escalation by Russia. So is the idea of escalation now meaningless when it's being used like this?
In my head, there is no idea of escalation. I think we should get security guarantees for Russia and the Russian people as soon as possible, again, on the battlefield or during the negotiations. Of course, right now we can see some recklessness decisions by Biden's administration, which is 2 months left in the White House. But if we're talking about escalation, follow some decisions. Mr. Biden told us that he is allowed to use long-range missiles, American long-range missiles, in response of North Korean soldiers in Kursk region. But would you tell me who saw North Korean soldiers in Kursk region? Even Pentagon doubt about those soldiers exist on our soil. I've been in the Kursk region a few days ago. I didn't see any Koreans, North Koreans, and South Koreans as well. No logic, no North Korean soldiers in Kursk region, but Biden allowed to use long-range missiles against our territory. Then we use new hypersonic missile, just one new hypersonic missile, which is, of course, high technology, and it was with no new nuke, without nuclear weapon, without nuclear warheads. We used it not against civilian infrastructure. It was used against military infrastructure, against a military plant, Yuzhmash. That's why we just, in the place of responding, we are responding on Western insane decisions.
I understood, yeah.
We are not running ahead of the West on this stair of escalation.
Understood, Evgeny. I just want to confirm. So I know you say you haven't seen North Korean soldiers, but are you saying they definitely haven't been used by on behalf of Russia?
I don't know. It's a myth. We don't have any confirmation from our military of defense. We don't have any confirmations from our war correspondents. We don't have any confirmation from locals. Try to hide 10,000 people in any territory. You can't do it. You couldn't do it. Nobody found it. Nobody saw it. It's like a myth for me. But the main point is that we don't need North Korean soldiers right now. We have enough recruits. Enough. We have more soldiers than Ukrainians has right now. It was a different situation just a year ago. I didn't know for what reason we need North Koreans.
Well, I was going to say, the Financial Times has reported that Yemen's Houthis are also recruiting mercenaries to fight on behalf of Russia. NATO, the US, and the West is reporting that there are killed North Korean soldiers on the battlefield as well. That's why, of course, that story has come out. Now, political and military leaders in the West are desperately trying to anticipate what Donald Trump might do. Do you think the Kremlin actually knows what his plan is? And do you know whether or not President Putin and President-elect Trump have actually spoken since the election?
It was clear from Kremlin administration that we don't have any. We didn't have any call and negotiations between Trump and Putin after he was elected as president. No way. And we don't have. I don't have any information about his plans. I have heard his promise that he will finish this conflict during 24 hours. He will finish this conflict during 24 hours. But I'm not sure he can do it. And don't overestimate the United States. They can't do less than they promise for many years.
You know, Evgeny, just to put it into perspective, thanks, but, you know, putting it in perspective, Donald Trump's nominee for National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz, suggested just recently that the incoming administration wishes to bring this war to a responsible end. Now, the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, himself also said what he wants is a fair peace deal. So what does a fair peace deal look like from a Russian perspective?
we have official Kremlin position about this, and we have heard Putin in Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the end of the summer. It was clear that we need security guarantees for Russia and the Russian people. We need to get all our constitutional territories, and we need to get guarantees from the West that Ukraine will not be in NATO alliance.
You know, it's interesting when you look at the two key players on both sides now. President-elect Trump is known as a deal maker who only wants to win. President Putin is known as an equally tough negotiator who doesn't want to lose. So when it comes to striking a peace deal regarding Ukraine, who's going to come out on top? Who wins such a battle? Why?
Our soldiers will win this war and this battle, because if you look on the battlefield, you will see that we're going forward every day, and we capture villages, new villages every day. And now time is on our side, of course, and we will destroy Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian army in our Kursk region, I hope very soon, until New Year. And I don't believe at any deal which possible in the next few months. Me personally, maybe it's possible, but I can't find any conditions which we will agree, except those I told you a minute ago. Right. We have to get our territories. We have to get security guarantees, and we have to get no NATO Ukraine.
Okay, so, you know, I want to get your perspective, Evgeny, on something that's in the news at the moment. The Russian state news agency TASS quotes a military source as saying what they call a UK mercenary who's been taken prisoner in the Kursk area of Russia, part of which, of course, Ukraine has held since launching that surprise offensive in August. Now, that mercenary has been named as 22-year-old James Scott Rees-Anderson. From your perspective, what kind of punishment does he face in Russia if he is charged?
No, it's years of prison, and he's not first and he's not last. He will be lucky if he will be subject of exchange. It will be the best for him to be exchanged on our guys who've been captured by Ukrainians. But dozens UK citizens were captured by our army during this conflict. US citizens, Colombian citizens, guys from most of the Western and America's countries. That's nothing new on this news. But what's new? He was first who've been captured in our historical territories. We captured him in Kursk region. That is new, but we've seen before a lot of foreigners which been captured by our army.
Evgeny, as we wrap up, I have to ask you, after Donald Trump won the election, why did your TV show run a segment that purported to congratulate his wife Melania's return to the White House by showing a series of nude and semi-naked pictures of her? You look like you were having fun with it, but Was that designed to humiliate the president-elect, and isn't there a risk of provoking him?
We're doing news for Russians and for Russian-speaking people. And of course, Melania is a respectable woman. He didn't do any bad for Russians, and she's beautiful. Why shouldn't we show her? We got those pictures from open sources, from old magazines. It's a usual work for journalists to show what we have.
Well, I appreciate you joining us, Evgeny, and I'm looking forward to having a chance to chat with you as, of course, the story develops. Evgeny Popov, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Well, my final guest today is the Ukrainian Member of Parliament, Oleksiy Goncharenko. His father was the mayor of Odessa, one of the cities that has come under intense Russian bombardment in recent days. I wanted to get his take on the mood in Ukraine in light of recent escalations, and also his reaction to Donald Trump's choice of special envoy for Ukraine. Oleksiy Goncharenko, thank you for joining the show. Now, I'll start by asking you, what do you make of President-elect Donald Trump's choice of the retired General Keith Kellogg as his special envoy to end the Ukraine-Russia conflict?
Yeah, I think this is a very good choice. I welcome this choice, and from all options, I think this is a very strong choice. General Kellogg, first of all, is a very experienced person. Secondly, he is in the context, and he is strong and hawkish on Iran, on China, on Russia, and that is good because all these axis of powers, which includes these countries, they understand only language of strength. And I think that General Kellogg is capable for this.
Now, when it comes to the new administration, we know now Donald Trump's picks for Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, National Security. Does that group present a more or less hopeful prospect than many feared during the election campaign when J.D. Vance said he didn't care what happened to Ukraine?
You know, for me, it's more optimistic because all the people you mentioned, especially Senator Rubio, whom I know personally, really strong and very good. And next, National Security Advisor Waltz, also very good. So I think it shows that these people are strong and that President-elect Trump is trying to take the best possible people. And I think that they can do a very good job.
Well, Mr. Goncharenko, how should Donald Trump approach negotiations with President Vladimir Putin, and how should President Zelensky approach talks with either of them?
I will allow myself to give some advices just because I really know what Russia is. And the main advice is to be strong. Peace through strength. That's the only way, because Putin does not understand anything else in the world. Anything else. The second thing, don't believe Putin. When Putin is saying something, it means nothing. That's you need to remember. And the third advice is not to believe and not to follow Russian bluffing, because there will be a lot of bluffing and chantage. That should not scare American representatives, and I hope it will not.
Considering what you just said, sir, what would an acceptable peace deal look like to Ukraine then?
What is the best peace deal for us is complete, full restoration of Ukrainian territorial integrity, and by this, restoration of international law and international order. How it will be in practice, I don't know. But next thing, which is so important, is the security guarantees, because we want really peace and not a ceasefire. And only security guarantees can prevent Russia from new invasion. So that is very, very important.
Well, Russia seems to be advancing on the battlefield faster than in past months. Are you worried that the battle lines could change in Russia's favor before any ceasefire takes place?
Yeah, it can happen. The Russians are advancing. We can't say that there is no blitzkrieg, there is no breakthrough from Russians, but it's a kind of advancing in the style of the First World War, just taking some trench after trench, 100 meters after 100 meters. Yeah, it's painful for us. It's our land. But it looks like they are advancing, and for the moment, we can't stop them. For this, we need more weaponry now, and I hope we will receive it. This will help us enormously. More air defense, more long-range capabilities, and more sanctions against Russia, because the only thing which gives them possibility to continue to advance is that their war chest is full, and more sanctions, especially against oil and gas. That is something we're looking for. And here, President-elect Donald Trump has a very good position from my point of view. As he said, I will drill, drill, drill. And that will lead to, that will definitely influence the oil prices, which will definitely influence Russia.
Well, on our previous guest on this episode, the Russian MP and TV host Evgeny Popov, told me there's no evidence that North Korean troops are supporting Russian forces in Kursk, as has been reported. Have you seen any evidence of their involvement?
In this case, I would like to ask what they're doing in Kursk region. So you see, even Russian so-called MP, because they don't have a parliament, it's not their way of their country, they're not democracy, so they just have something which they call the parliament. But even him, and he is quite famous Russian propagandist, even him is not arguing that North Koreans are in Kursk region. And you can open the map of the world and ask yourself what North Koreans are doing in thousands and thousands and thousands of miles and kilometers from their home.
Well, either way, with or without North Korean reinforcements, could Ukrainian forces withstand a substantial counterattack? And how important is that region as a bargaining chip in future negotiations?
It is important, and we are fighting there, trying to keep the lines. We will see how it will develop. In any way, Russians need to pay a lot of attention to this region, which is also good for us, which diminishes their possibility to pay attention to Ukrainian regions under attack. So we will see. It's the war. It's very hard to predict anything in the war.
Mr. Goncharenko, how much difference are long-range missiles making? And is it potentially too little, too late?
For the moment, it is too little, too late, but in any way, we welcome it and we are thankful for this. And we hope that more will arrive. They are making difference, and they can make much bigger difference if we will receive these missiles in a big number.
Now, one thing the former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has done, he's accused European leaders and the new Labour government in Britain of failing to do enough to make their continued support for Ukraine clear. Does he have a point? Do Ukrainians feel let down?
No. Well, about British government, we don't have any question. British government is supportive, like it was in the time of Prime Minister Johnson, which I'm very thankful for him, especially the first months of the invasion. His role was really great in uniting the world for supporting Ukraine. But then all other prime ministers, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, now Keir Starmer, they're doing a great job. United Kingdom is a real partner and real friend. But we need to remember that it's not a charity from the United Kingdom, but fulfilling of their responsibilities. In 1994, in December, so exactly 30 years ago, it was United Kingdom and the United States which made Ukraine to give up our nuclear weaponry to Russia. And they gave us security guarantees in the form of Budapest Memorandum, which is now we can only laugh on this because it happens that it's not a guarantee. But in any way, United Kingdom and the United States, they have a responsibility to help Ukraine in the situation we are. Because if not their influence 30 years ago, and if Ukraine would have nuclear weaponry that we had, never, ever what had happened with us would not happen.
Well, Boris Johnson also surprised a few people when he likened President Putin to Adolf Hitler and President Zelensky to Winston Churchill. Do you think that's a fair analogy?
The first part definitely is. The second, only history can give the answers. So I can tell you that it's not about just President Zelensky. It's about Ukrainian people and the fight of Ukrainian people That made also Zelensky, as a representative of Ukrainian people, really famous. But what is historical is not just one personality, which is President Zelensky. Again, we will finally estimate him later, but Ukrainian people and our will for freedom. And I think this is unprecedented.
As things have escalated, President Putin has talked about using his new Oreshnik hypersonic missiles to strike what he calls Ukraine's decision-making centers. What do you think he means by that, and how seriously are you taking such threats?
Now we see the big campaign by Putin, campaign of blackmailing and threatening of the world with these Oreshnik missiles. In reality, nobody knows how effective it was. I can tell you where Oreshnik strike happened, there is no big result. What does it mean? I don't know how effective really it is. Secondly, how many of these Oreshnik missiles really Russia has? We also don't know this. So it looks more like a bluffing from Putin. And in any way, I want to tell you, we're not afraid of his threats, because we know with whom we deal. This is existential for us, and Russia is already using everything they can against us. So if they would have everything they have, except nukes, they're using. And the only reason they're not using nukes, because it will be a physical end for themselves, and for Putin included. That's why they're not using it.
Well, sir, give us some idea what effect the latest Russian attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure has had on civilian life as winter approaches. And is this a marked escalation or simply a continuation of Russia's ongoing strategy?
It's continuation. They started this 2 years ago. It will be already the third winter like this. Russians, that is a Russian war playbook, their warfare style, to terrorize civilians, to make them suffer, to make their life unbearable. That's what they're doing. And they did it, something like this in Syria, in order to cause their migration waves. They did it in many other places before. So they continue this brutal style. What are the results? Millions of Ukrainians are without electricity today. There are problems with heating, with water supply. Yeah, but it's nothing new for us. That's something which happens already for the third winter.
Well, on the point of strategy, we've been hearing reports and claims that Russia's also been involved in a kind of hybrid warfare involving sabotage and cyber attacks. The Kremlin has denied such strategy, but what's your understanding of the situation?
What to deny? Russia is making hybrid attacks, sabotage attacks, terroristic attacks throughout the whole world, especially in Europe. Salisbury, where they used chemical weapons, DHL airplane, which falls in Vilnius in Lithuania just days ago, after there were information from European intelligence that Russia is going to attack DHL flights, all their attacks against depots, all their cyber attacks, all their attacks against infrastructure like cables, like internet, and so on and so on. So Russia is conducting a full-scale hybrid war against the civilized world.
Well, final thought, Mr. Goncharenko. What's your response to the popular podcaster Joe Rogan's derogatory comments about President Zelensky and Joe Biden, accusing them of escalating the conflict to a point that could trigger a nuclear world war?
I want to invite Mr. Rogan to Ukraine. I want to show him what's happening there on the ground. And I think in this case, his thoughts and his views will change significantly. So if you want to comment something, it's very good to know about this a little bit more than just to read something in media, especially in Russian media.
Well, Alexei Goncharenko, thank you very much for giving us a perspective on the show.
Thank you.
And that's all for this episode of the show. I'm Riz Khan from me and the team. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.
At Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News.
It's very impressive.
Where knowledge meets perspective.
London. Oh, London. It is known as the world's financial capital, along with New York, and is also Europe's cultural hub. More than 300 languages are spoken in London. The city houses many famous luxury hotels, but there are many cheaper accommodations too. You can try the hostels, a comfortable B&B, or even camping. London is home to the most amazing attractions in the world, and there are many ways to view it. See the city from above and get a panoramic view of the iconic skyline via the London Eye or view from the Shard. The Thames also makes for a stunning backdrop to the city's known attractions. You can take the river bus services or river tours to beat the traffic and see wonderful sights at the same time. Schedule trips to London's canals, including Regent's Canal and Little Venice. Have a look at the world's most precious treasures at the British Museum. Bump into a famous celebrity at Madame Tussauds, or meet the dinosaurs at the Natural History Museum. Many of London's best museums and galleries are actually free. You can spend time browsing through the British Museum, Natural History Museum, or the Science Museum at no cost. For clean and green spaces, London boasts of 8 royal parks, including Hyde Park and Richmond Park. London also houses one of the best theater scenes in the world. You can catch one of the long-running musicals, classic plays, or brand new works making their West End debuts. Expect to see famous faces on the London stage. Meanwhile, you can also take a culinary journey around the world with London's diverse restaurants. Choose from the Michelin-starred restaurants, the gastropubs, the traditional British restaurants, and places for afternoon tea. London is famous for its bar scene, with rooftop bars, riverside pubs, and champagne bars to offer. On a shopping spree, places to visit are the flagship stores on Oxford Street and the gifts and bric-a-brac at London's markets. The city also hosts the best sporting events in the world. Home to English football is the Wembley Stadium. See a match at Lord's Cricket Ground or Wimbledon Lawn Tennis Museum.
From the White House to Gaza, Kiev to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake and artificial intelligence,
They've got to have a vote and a say.
it's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on the Riz Khan Show for empowering conversation.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Global News Today, bringing you exclusive insights and fresh perspectives from leading experts and influential decision makers every weekday here on Arabiya News. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up on today's program, President Joe Biden faces criticism over his decision to pardon his son, Hunter Biden, a move which President-elect Donald Trump has called a miscarriage of justice. The president-elect has announced that his daughter's father-in-law, Massad Boulos, the Lebanon-born billionaire, is now named White House advisor for Arab and Middle Eastern affairs. And Syrian and Russian jets intensify their airstrikes on Aleppo as Iran pledges unconditional support for President Bashar al-Assad. Hello and welcome to the program. First of all, the US President Joe Biden has been criticized by Republicans for pardoning his son over federal gun and tax charges. Well, the chair of the House Committee of Oversight and Accountability, James Comer, on X, accused President Biden of, quote, lying about his family's corrupt influence peddling activities. Well, President-elect Donald Trump has also responded by calling for the pardon and the release of the January 6th, quote, hostages. Well, for more, we can cross to Washington and speak now to Bill Daley, the former White House Chief of Staff to President Barack Obama, who also served as Secretary of Commerce under President Bill Clinton. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Can I just start by asking you for your reaction to this news of a pardon for Hunter Biden?
Well, anyone who knows the president and knows the closeness of his family, I don't think would be surprised that at the final days or weeks of his administration, that he would pardon his son. It is a very personal thing. The family has gone through much over the last number of years of difficulties. There's a strong belief by the president and his family that Hunter was targeted. It was one of the very, very, very few tax charges or gun charges. So there's circumstances, but knowing the closeness of his family, I don't think anyone who really knows that family is at all surprised by the president's action.
But there are those who are going to say, should presidents really be using clemency to help their friends, family, and their allies? What do you say to that?
Well, there's no doubt that there's much criticism that's going to come from him, to him, and he knows that. And you look at previous presidents, President Trump, at the end of his term, pardoned a whole host of people who never went through any sort of process at the Justice Department either for that pardon. Obviously, it is a unquestioned power of a president. It will affect in history how he's viewed, and that is important to presidents when they leave office. So there's a lot of haranguing right now by people who were very supportive of other presidents giving pardons out willy-nilly without a lot of logic at times to those pardons. So I think there is a bit of hypocrisy going on. On the other hand, there's no doubt this will affect the president's legacy and how he is viewed by people in history.
How do you think it will change it? Do you think it will be permanently stained as a result?
Oh, I think it will be something that will be noted. I think over time it will be viewed as strictly a personal thing. Obviously, he is taking criticism. He knows, I'm sure he knows he would. But, you know, when you get down to the point of an 82-year-old man who's got one son left, who has had all these difficulties, and their family believes strongly that he was targeted because of who his father was, and that if he was not a Biden, he would not have been, this is their opinion, would not have been targeted, and therefore it is the only right thing to do as a family at the very end. He has that power. But there's no question, as I say, it will impact his legacy.
And in terms of the charges, tax violations, firearms-related charges, just how serious do you think they actually were?
Well, the gun charge, I don't think anyone could find but a handful at most. I don't know the real details, to be very honest with you, Tom. But I don't think there were many cases at all of people in a similar situation as he was on that gun charge that were then going to be put into prison as a first offense. On the tax charge, to a certain degree, a similar thing. Again, the charge was not paying taxes, which he then eventually paid with interest. Again, a case that usually, for someone not so high profile, but there's good and bad to be high profile. obviously he benefited from the profile that he had. On the other hand, when you make mistakes as he did, that then justify a case, you've got to understand that that's the good and bad of these family positions. When someone like the patriarch of the family is the president, the whole family in certain ways benefits, and then there's a negative side to that comes with it.
I think a lot of people were a bit confused because 5 weeks ago, the White House press secretary said there have been no plans for any such pardon. And I'm just wondering why you think since the November the 7th, there's been this
I don't think it has anything to do with a date or a statement or anything like that. I think he was intent, and the government made it clear, the prosecutors in the case, that they were going to go for rather long-term sentencing in their statements to the judge, that they wanted real jail time for him. And that probably was the final straw on the pile of hay for this president to make the decision. But it is again, many people have talked about this in the past, the unquestioned power that a president has to grant a pardon for no matter what reason he or she wants to. And again, there's plenty of examples of different presidents, former president himself with pardons at the end, with other presidents doing pardons at the end that were rather controversial, that impacted their legacy, some long-term and some short-term.
Okay, but I guess the sense of my question is perhaps whether there's a good deal of nervousness at the moment that Donald Trump is going to come good on the sort of threat he's put out there, that he will go after some of his opponents, legally speaking.
Yeah, and I think he has been very clear on that for a very long time. Nothing to do with a pardon by the president of his son. So that's a whole nother issue, that when the president-elect has control of the functions of government, especially the Department of Justice, he has made it clear that he is going to look at cases and actions that were taken against him over the last 8 or 12 years, whatever period he wants. But he's been the one thing about President-elect Trump is he's very clear in what he says. There's not a lot of smoke and mirrors there. He's made it very clear what he plans to do, and it remains to be seen whether or not he will do that, and can do that, and can the Attorney General, if she gets confirmed, the nominee, that she will take those sort of actions, and then what the court system may do. We do have a very aggressive court system, as you know, and there are judges throughout the country from different parties, different presidents appointed, and they will, I'm sure, be faced with a number of cases that they'll have to decide.
Just to be clear, I mean, let's imagine a scenario in which Kamala Harris had won the election. I mean, do you envisage President Biden in that situation seeking a pardon for his son, or would he have felt it wasn't necessary?
I think he would have pardoned him anyways. It's my opinion.
Okay. A full and unconditional pardon, he says, for any offences committed during the period 1st of January 2014 to the 1st of December 2024. That's a 10-year period. Just tell us about a presidential pardon. Can it be reversed?
No.
So that's it for in terms of what the next administration wants to do. They cannot come after Hunter Biden in any way.
Not on federal cases in that period. Obviously, state prosecutions are different than federal. He has pardoned them for any federal crimes. That's the only power the president has. It does not apply to state cases, as the case that President Trump was in New York state courts. He can't pardon himself from that case. So it applies to all federal cases in that period. So, it's rather surprisingly that it was such a broad statement, but obviously the president believed that President Trump or his administration would come after his son if they were not able to go after him.
Yeah, and Donald Trump has obviously reacted to this, the president-elect saying, why doesn't the pardon include the January 6th, he calls them hostages. I just wonder what you think the president-elect is really getting at here.
I think he's been very clear that he will probably pardon the January 6th the people who were convicted in federal court for criminal actions around January 6th. He's made it very clear. And I think he's just previewing what his actions probably would be regarding those people.
Okay, and one of the things that President Biden said as he issued the statement, he said, "I hope all Americans will understand why a father and a president would come to this decision." And I'm wondering whether you think that a majority of Americans, I mean, really just to help us gauge public opinion there in America, whether you think a majority of Americans would indeed agree with the president's decision.
I don't know, Tom. To be honest with you, as you know, the country is evenly divided. My guess is that most people who even may not be sympathetic to President Biden will be sympathetic to the fact as a father in the situation he's in, probably in the final years of his life, would not want to see his son being harassed, in his opinion, by the next administration. So, but how it shakes out as far as the public opinion, I'm sure the people who don't like Biden won't like it, and the people who like Biden will be somewhat questioning it. So, but it doesn't really matter, except, as I said, as far as what impact it may have on his legacy over time. And that's history will decide that, not public opinion in the next 42 hours or 3 weeks or 3 months.
I mean, obviously, if the comments of James Comer, the chair of the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, if his comments are anything to go by, and he says Joe Biden has lied from start to finish about his family's corrupt influence peddling activities, he also said this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, it suggests that...
Well, you're mixing all sorts of things here, as Comer has done. Comer tried to impeach President Biden a number of times, had hearings about his allegations about corruption or whatever, and it never went anywhere. So
he seems to be suggesting there's a lot more to this than those two charges.
Well, he's been suggesting that for 4 years, and nothing's been found that confirms that, even though they have spent millions in investigations and trying to uncover some conspiracy or whatever he believes, but it has never gone anywhere. And even though they've been in charge of the House now through the entire presidency of President Biden, and so that these are just political statements in response to the president's pardon of his son. So I would not necessarily say that whatever is being said by the politicians right now is truthful.
Okay, and of course Hunter Biden would have been sentenced a week today. I think it was scheduled for the 19th of December. Do you think he'd have gone to prison?
Well, the prosecutors made it clear, from what I've read, that they wanted prison time, which would be very rare for a first offense for someone in his situation, especially, as I understand it. Again, I'm not a criminal lawyer. I really haven't followed it that much. The fact that he did pay with interest whatever tax he allegedly owed over whatever period it was that he didn't file the appropriate tax returns.
Okay, and just lastly, before we let you go, I mean, do you think it's fair to say that President Biden and his administration, his inner circle, have rather mismanaged this whole affair?
I don't know. I think when you consider all the problems going on in the world right now and all the challenges that he even faces over the next 40 days and the president-elect faces, to spend so much time on this issue is kind of a waste, in my opinion, to your listeners or viewers or anything. So, but it is what it is.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Bill Daly, thank you. Okay, well, let's get another set of opinions now, and we can speak to Scotty Nell Hughes, Republican strategist and a political commentator who joins us now from Nashville, Tennessee. Great to have you back with us here on Al Arabiya News. Donald Trump said in October that he wouldn't be surprised if Hunter Biden were to receive a pardon. So I'm just wondering whether there's really such a great sense of surprise, or is there a sense of inevitability about this decision by President Biden?
I think that's quite accurate that you said that this was inevitable. In fact, most would think that it was quite noble for a father. No father wants to see their son to go to jail, especially if they can prevent it. At least a good father, which Joe Biden has attested to be several times, at least when it was politically convenient for him. But in this case, the main difference that exists besides just a good father protecting his son is that time and time again, Joe Biden told the press, his White House press secretary told the press, told the public that they would not do this. So this was the action they were never going to take. Even when people offered it up, he said, no, I'm not going to take this course. And I think that's the main concern. Number one is that Joe Biden lied once again to the American people, both him and his administration. And the second concern is how broad of a net this pardon is. It's not just simply the last few years or what they want to make it out to be, this tax evasion or potentially the possession of a firearm charges. This is something that's 10-year span. And I think that's such a broad net that raises so many red flags amongst Republicans when there's so many concerns out about Hunter Biden and his business dealings internationally over the past decade to 2 decades of Biden being in power.
Okay, you say President Biden lied, but let's not forget, I mean, the president has the right and the privilege of issuing pardons. He's also allowed to change his mind, isn't he?
Absolutely. But time and time again, people asked him. It wasn't like he was just asked once or twice. And he was asked not only before the election, but also after the election of it. So he can change his mind. But if you are so enamored with protecting your son, why this change? Now, there is obviously going to be speculation on the internet. Potentially a book was going to be released, other articles coming out. And obviously the actual convictions were coming down in the next few weeks to Hunter Biden. So Joe Biden. But what's interesting about this is that the fact that the president chose a pardon in this case, where if he, for these what considered to be somewhat minor convictions that Hunter has been on the stand for and he's been convicted of, his sentencing, well, that could have been easily he could have actually taken it a different legal route. But instead, the president decided to pardon him, not only for this, but all crimes from the last 10 years. And I think that's the bigger picture and the bigger concern.
Donald Trump's no stranger to pardons, is he? Because in his final weeks in office, he pardoned Charles Kushner, and we all know that he's the father of his own son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and numerous allies who were convicted in the Robert Mueller Russia investigation were also pardoned. So, you know, these things happen, don't they?
But Donald Trump never said he wasn't going to. In fact, I think a lot of folks wondered why there were other people's like Julian Assange who was pardoned on Donald Trump's out. This wasn't necessarily it's not that Donald Trump told the people, I'm not going to pardon them and then changed his mind. And it wasn't his direct son that, like I said, there's so many other questions that are out there remaining. And so I think that's the difference. People want to draw this conclusion that, oh, well, Trump did this and Trump did. It's a completely different situation in the fact that none of Trump's direct descendants have been convicted in a court of law. And if it was just simply about those convictions, why in the world would Joe Biden make it such a broad pardon of 10-year span? That right there is the question that we need to be looking into.
Yeah, but we often hear Donald Trump saying that he's been singled out, he's a victim of a witch hunt, all that sort of thing. So, I mean, there is the recognition out there that people in the public eye, the sons of presidents included, can be subject to rather more scrutiny than the average person on the street in the United States. I mean, don't you think it's fair, therefore, that if he's given this sort of, unprecedented level of scrutiny, his father should give him some sort of unprecedented treatment as well?
In the words of Joe Biden, no one is above the law. And that's exactly what he said. He made that to be one of the parts of his campaign against Donald Trump over the past year. And I think the bigger question that on this, what those that say that, they're saying, Joe Biden is justifying this, saying, well, I'm doing this because of possible political targeting of my son in the future. Well, where would we have gotten that idea from? Where would you get that idea from? Well, because this administration did it to Trump's family, did it to Donald Trump over the past 4 years. So if anything, Donald Trump is taking a page out of Joe Biden's playbook, or at least that's Joe Biden is fear-mongering and saying it's going to do. But right now there's this, you're looking at a 630-page report on that came out about Hunter's laptop. Within that report, 191 sex crimes alleged, 128 drug crimes, 140 business crimes alleged. All of those deserve to be investigated in. And I think Joe Biden's attempt to try to cover his son from any of that in the future, hopefully is going to fail, as Republicans are not just going to take this and move on.
correct me if I'm wrong, but Donald Trump said at one point that he'd consider pardoning Hunter Biden himself. He said words to the effect he'd been a bad boy or something along those lines. Why do you think he said that?
Well, he would consider it as anybody would, but once again, it was considered knowing the full story and the full case of it. Like I said, if this was just simply about a minor drug conviction or a minor illegal firearm holding, then, you know, that would be something that would be, I don't think they're good charges, but it's obviously minor compared to the bigger scheme of things. But like I said, there's bigger issues out there that I think there's still, I mean, let's talk about how Donald Trump was actually impeached for making a phone call that potentially could be the reason why Joe Biden had to pardon his own son. So this goes a lot deeper than just this very superficial, the minor crimes that Hunter Biden has been convicted of. We were just in the beginning of finding out exactly how big the Biden family dwellings had been internationally, as well as here at home.
I just put this question to our earlier guest about the seriousness of the charges. And of course, Hunter Biden had been due to face sentencing a week today. Do you think he'd have gone to prison?
If anything, it would have been a house arrest. He's been under house arrest before. It's pretty hard to put someone that has, you know, Secret Service protection, which Hunter Biden still currently has as the son of the president, in jail, as those that have tried to put Donald Trump in jail have learned. But I think there probably would have been there obviously would have been some minor sentencing for the crimes he had. And that's one of those things that, like I said, people might understand why Joe Biden would have done this. What they don't understand is, why is it 10 years? Why is it such a broad net to cover Hunter Biden and all of his business dealings as well?
Well, if you ask Hunter Biden, he might say something along the lines of, quote, "I have been exploited to publicly humiliate and shame me and my family for political sport." I'm wondering how you respond to that comment that he made.
Well, I mean, like, if you want to detect and defer, but it wasn't the public that was in there and illegally buying a gun. It wasn't the public doing illegal drugs. It wasn't the public that was sitting there and selling access to his father all of these years, potentially violating multiple laws, both domestic and international. So he can sit there and defer and make it the public be the enemy. But the reality of it is, he cannot sit there and commit these crimes and then decry victim. As Joe Biden says, no one is above the law, even if your last name is Biden.
I mean, I'd have thought there'd be a little bit of public sympathy out there. And tell me what the situation is with regards to the court of public opinion in the United States. Because, you know, people in the public eye, you know, their offspring are obviously in the public eye, not entirely of their own volition. I mean, is there a sense of understanding in the United States that, you know, OK, he's not a child, but the sons, daughters, the offspring of senior political figures are to be given a little bit of slack, because, after all, as I said, you know, there are huge pressures associated with being in the public eye, and they've got no training for it.
You know, I think that the American people are very giving, have a lot of empathy, especially to those that are in celebrity status and their children, or at least they should. But in this case, it's not like it's just one time. It's not like it's two times. Let's just talk about how Hunter Biden has plagued Joe Biden's entire administration for the last 4 years. But also prior to that, Hunter Biden was always the thorn, the sort of like, I don't even say the bad child, but he was always the problem that was bringing the bad headlines to the Biden-Harris campaign, to the Biden administration and forefront. So it's not like the American people hasn't tried. It isn't like Hunter hasn't actually, but you're talking about a man who does continue to act like a child, a man that has a love child that they won't even hang the grandchild's the stocking along with the other family members along the fireplace at Christmas time, and refuse to actually even meet with this love child. So there's lots of issues about Hunter Biden. It's not just one, it's multiple. And at some point, if Joe Biden's not going to be a good dad and hold his son accountable for the actions that he makes that hurts others, maybe it's going to be the American people that have to actually hold Hunter Biden accountable, because it doesn't look like his dad's going to.
Just before we let you go, just want to ask your parting thoughts, Nellie. I mean, how do you think President Joe Biden's going to be remembered?
Well, that's the sad part in all of this, because if you were a Democrat and you were wanting to leave with Joe Biden having some sort of a good memory, this right here is going to be something he is going to be remembered for. And I think it's going to be his lasting legacy, is in the fact that one of his last moves was pardoning his own son. Meanwhile, just waiting things out. Not to mention that there's no doubt that when Kamala Harris lost, it was really Joe Biden's legacy that lost in November. And so I think it's going to be one that's going to be of shame. It's going to be one that people are not going to speak very highly of, because obviously Democrats don't like to lose. However, considering we're living in an era right now that Jimmy Carter, who back in the 80s was absolutely in the same sort of position, was considered to be the worst president in United States history, is now being beloved, mainly, as he faces his final days. The American people are very forgiving. So it'll be interesting to see if maybe 10, 20, 30 years from now, how folks will remember Joe Biden, and if Hunter Biden will even be a blip on his screen.
All right, well, we'll have to have that conversation again in a couple of decades from now. Thank you very much indeed. Scotty Nell Hughes, thank you. Well, staying with US politics, and President-elect Donald Trump has tapped the Lebanon-born businessman Massad Boulos as his senior advisor for Arab and Middle Eastern affairs. Well, Boulos is also the father-in-law of the president-elect's daughter, Tiffany Trump. Well, Donald Trump made the announcement on Truth Social, highlighting Boulos's legal and business expertise. He expressed pride in his choice, praising Boulos as an accomplished lawyer with extensive experience, especially when it comes to international affairs. Well, Trump also called Boulos a deal maker and an unwavering supporter of peace in the Middle East. Well, let's discuss this further with Reed Gallen, who is the co-founder of the Lincoln Project and former Republican strategist for George W. Bush, John McCain and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Thank you very much indeed for being with us once again here on Al Arabiya News. Massad Boulos, of course, senior advisor on Arab and Middle Eastern affairs. Just tell us what you think he brings to the table.
Obviously, just what I've read about him, he's obviously born in Lebanon. I believe he actually either ran or tried to run for office there a couple of times. So he has experience in the region. Whether or not he has experience in the idea of trying to bring together all of the factions in a very, very unstable region in the world right now, I think remains to be seen. Being good at business and being good at diplomacy are two different things. I think the most important thing he has going for him right now is that he happens to be related by marriage to Donald Trump. And as we've seen with his picks for other things, including his daughter's father-in-law, making him ambassador to France, Trump very much likes to have people he has familial connections to, with the idea that they are more trustworthy than people probably outside the family circle.
Do you think there's a message in this appointment, just looking at Boulos's familial ties and his credentials, about the Trump administration's plans and vision for the Middle East?
I don't think that there's any particular vision at this moment, other than they're going to be very, very hard on Iran, going to be very pro-Israel, but those things have been widely and long stated by former President Trump during his campaign and now in the incoming administration. This job hasn't existed before, so I think a lot of it still remains to be seen what it means. Is this, something that Mr. Boulos wanted, he felt like he could be a part of because he is related to Donald Trump? Or is it something that he feels like he's eminently qualified for because of his background in the region? I think that remains to be seen. Long-term planning is very hard to do in Donald Trump's orbit because he's so capricious and arbitrary when he makes decisions. I think he has an idea of who he likes and who he doesn't like, but actually putting pen to paper or trying to accomplish some actual plan, I think, is still a long way off.
And in terms of what you know about him and his career path, I mean, do you see things that he can put to good use in his capacity in this new role?
I mean, again, as I said, just from what I've read about him, which admittedly is not that much, and I don't think there's a ton out there, there will be more as we go along, is that, again, he has, he's born in Lebanon, he's got deep ties there. It appears that he has ties to various, as I said, factions. He may be Arab, but he is not Muslim. And, he has connections that have connections to people like Hezbollah. So it'll be interesting to see how he himself squares those relationships as, a main Iranian proxy who's already been under attack, literally under attack by Israel, and a Trump administration who will feel very emboldened and empowered to take a harder line against Iran. It'll be interesting to see how Mr. Boulos tries to, again, if this becomes something other than a more ceremonial position, sees how he tries to square those circles.
Yeah, indeed. We'll talk about them a little bit more in a moment. I just want to ask you about a comment that Donald Trump made in making this announcement. He said that Mr. Boulos had been instrumental in building tremendous new coalitions with Arab American communities. And I'm wondering whether you feel that there's a sense perhaps from Donald Trump that he owes Mr. Boulos for what he brought to the campaign trail.
Donald Trump doesn't really feel like he ever owes anybody anything. I think that Boulos was out there probably in a state like Michigan, where there is a large Muslim American community out there telling people that, that Kamala Harris and her campaign were not good for Muslims. Look, I mean, in one of the big important counties in Michigan, Kamala Harris, I think, got 34%. Jill Stein, a perennial Green Party candidate, picked up 18%. In a place where you see very close, outcomes like a state like Michigan, that really does matter. So whether or not he was instrumental, I'm not willing to say because I just don't know the data that well. But also in his heart of hearts, Trump thinks he did it all by himself. So if he said that, I think it was just to put it on paper, make this guy feel good, make his daughter feel good. But at the end of the day, Trump's going to do what's best for him. And right now, Boulos looks like it's best for him.
Okay, so turning our eye to this portfolio, and as you say, it's a new role that didn't exist before, and it comes at a very interesting time. I mean, as you mentioned, there's a lot happening in this region. There's a war in Gaza. There's this fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. We've just been reporting here on Arabiya News about unrest in Syria. And obviously, he's going to have to work, Mr. Boulos, with people in the Trump administration, like Donald Trump's pick for ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. I'm wondering how you see him working with other people in the Trump administration.
Well, that's a really interesting question, because the feature of organizations like Trump's and administrations like Trump's in the past is the issue is that he is perfectly willing as president to keep people off balance, to make sure that no one, if someone's climbing up ladder A, that someone on ladder B is being pushed down. And one of the features of Trump's organization, the Make America Great Again movement, is that the only people they dislike more than outsiders are each other. And so it will be very interesting to see, on a given day, who's up, who's down, who's got Trump's ear, right? Mike Huckabee will be in Jerusalem. Mr. Boulos will be wherever it is he's going to be. And Donald Trump is a very tactile guy. He's a very visual guy, right? Whoever's in the office with him very well might convince him to do something that others don't even know about, let alone have had time to weigh in on or agree on. And so I think it's far too early to say, but I will say this, is that internal conflict in the Trump administration is as likely to gum up the works of anything they want to do more than any outside pressure probably could.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of one thing they are all going to agree on, looking at some of what Mr. Boulos has been saying. He's quoted as saying the war in Gaza needs to be finished, quote, quickly. Everyone's going to say, yeah, we agree on that on all sides, not least the president-elect, who's been saying the same thing. But the question of how they're going to end the war quickly, that's going to be where there's going to be some pretty heated discussions, aren't there?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, what's the definition of end? Right? What does it look like to end a war that's, basically one-sided at this point? What does that look like? What's left of Gaza, to be honest with you? You're right. It sort of looks like Berlin, 1945 at this point. And there are a lot of downstream questions from that are not just as easy as, okay, the IDF is going to stop shooting and the militants in Gaza are going to stop shooting back. There's a lot more to say, a lot more to be done. Trump is obviously very close to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, so he will do what he thinks he needs to keep Netanyahu in power. But the idea of, ending a war is all well and good, but the guys with the guns have to agree to stop shooting at each other.
And of course, we've heard Mr. Boulos talking about rebuilding Lebanon, and as you mentioned, he is of Lebanese origin. I mean, that ought to be quite reassuring to politicians in Beirut, particularly at this particular moment?
I would think so. But again, this goes back to, the kinds of campaign promises that Donald Trump made and the kinds of expectations that Donald Trump supporters have. When you say rebuild Lebanon, okay, well, who's going to pay for that? Is it going to be the United States? Because if it's the United States, then there's going to be a whole bunch of otherwise conservative or Donald Trump voters who said, I didn't vote for that. I didn't vote to start rebuilding places. They don't want to spend money in Ukraine. They don't want to spend money overseas. My guess is they're not going to want to spend money rebuilding Lebanon either. So I think that rebuilding Lebanon, which has for decades was a pearl of the Middle East, I think is a worthy and glorious ambition. But the question now comes down to details, which is, okay, are you going to put American dollars behind that? Who's going to pay for that stuff? And I think that's where, again, so much of these things, it's all well and good to say it in a press release or in a tweet or whatever it is. But now, okay, if you've got real policy-making ability and authority, what are you going to do with it?
I just want to pick up on something you said a little earlier on, the discussion about family involvement. The father of two of Donald Trump's daughter's husbands, Michael Boulos, married, of course, to Trump's daughter Tiffany. Charles Kushner married to the father of his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who's going to be now the U.S. ambassador to France. How unusual is it in U.S. politics to have family members of the president thrust into the limelight like this?
I would say this is that, if you go back to the early 1960s, John F. Kennedy hired his brother, Robert F. Kennedy Sr., to be his attorney general. And I think family members have often played unofficial roles in presidencies just because of the nature of the relationship with the president. But Trump has taken it to a whole new and different level. I think using the word inappropriate is not worth it anymore because Trump has so erased the lines of what is acceptable and unacceptable, not only in American politics, but also in how White Houses operate. This is one where, again, he likes people he believes he can trust. And the people he believes he can trust most are family members, whether or not they're qualified or not, whether or not they're the right person or not is immaterial. Loyalty is job one for Donald Trump and the people around him. And that's good for Donald Trump, probably not good for the American people.
And just lastly, before we let you go, I'd just like to put this to you. Donald Trump and Masad Boulos, how do you rate their chances of bringing peace to this region?
Well, considering how many people have done it in the past and failed, I don't think the odds are in their favor, unfortunately. And I say that not as someone who's observing American politics, but is observing the Middle East and the people there who are struggling and, trying to maintain, the basics of life, let alone, a normal life. As you noted, there's unrest in, there's a war in Gaza. There's fighting in Lebanon. Now, the insurgents are taking Aleppo and Syria is now picking up again. So I think that this is one where, as you know better than anyone, right, and your viewers know better than anyone, there's no easy day in the region. And I don't believe that just because Donald Trump is going to take office in 6 or 7 weeks, that the easy days will begin.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you talking to us. Reid Gallen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, Syria is back in the headlines as opposition forces make a dramatic comeback, capturing much of Aleppo, Syria's second largest city. Well, this follows a swift offensive which began last week against President Bashar al-Assad, marking a major shift in the conflict, which had been largely frozen for 4 years. Well, just to give you some background, in Syria's civil war, Iran and Turkey supported opposing sides. Turkey has long backed the opposition forces, while Iran, along with Russia, have supported the Syrian army. Well, despite the difference in allegiances between Ankara and Tehran, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi arrived in the Turkish capital earlier today for high-level talks to discuss the situation. Well, to discuss this further, we're joined now from northern Syria by Ismail Al-Abdullah, who's a volunteer for the White Helmets. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Just tell us, if you will, first of all, what's your understanding of what the situation is right now in and around Aleppo?
Aleppo City, the history, it's repeating itself, right? once again, the history is repeating itself once again. Aleppo city under attack after we were displaced by the Assad regime in Russia in 2016 in December right away. In 2024 right now, Aleppo under attack. Just before we talk, there were airstrikes in the neighborhoods of Aleppo. On the Baghdad station, which is in the heart of the city, was hit by an airstrike, and two neighborhoods were also under attack. Our volunteers started operating in the Aleppo city yesterday. Now they are responding to those attacks and helping and trying their best to helping the civilians to evacuate if they want, those civilians who want to evacuate from Aleppo city to the north countryside. Also, on the other hand, in Idlib city, there was a horrible massacre today, and 15 people were killed. 5 of them were killed in the city of Idlib, and 8 in the IDP camp north of Idlib. Also, 2 died in Maraturin town, which is south of Idlib. Also, before we talk, there's an airstrike targeted the University Hospital of Idlib. 2 sick people died because of the oxygen broke down by the attack that happened just maybe half hour ago.
Okay, so clearly the situation is evolving extremely fast. And I'm assuming that until last week, things have been fairly quiet for the White Helmets, haven't they?
Yes. 4 days ago, it was quiet. Nothing is happening. Just artillery shelling on the front lines, and there were bombing. There was bombing by artillery shelling on the front lines and the town and villages that are close. But this scale of damage, this scale of bombing, this is scale of attacking civilians directly, deliberately, like what's happened in Aleppo city, the same hospital attacked the same name in Aleppo city and the same in Idlib. Today, Idlib University Hospital was attacked half an hour ago, and yesterday, University Hospital in Aleppo was targeted, also resulted in death, 10 casualties, and also a day before, also there was a big massacre in the entrance of Aleppo city. 15 people were killed by the airstrike. It's totally different from the last week and now. Now bombing everywhere, every village, every town under attack, and people are fleeing, and they are fearing from the worst that maybe they will follow up the strategy the same they did in Aleppo city before 8 years, when they followed the scourged earth. They bomb everything with all kinds of weapons, the banned weapons and all kinds of weapons. They destroy everything that gives life. Now, if this bombing will last for just few days, Idlib will be destroyed completely. All the buildings of Idlib will be collapsed, especially when they are intensifying their bombing on the city, on the center of the city of Idlib.
Okay, so you're painting a picture of a new chapter of death and destruction. New chapter that we have witnessed before in Aleppo and Homs, and those cities that were collapsed, and they were filmed by the Russian media outlet that they were proud of destroying Aleppo city, if you remember, in 2016, and Homs, and those cities that destroyed completely. Okay, so and as you say, a number of people killed in these various incidents that you've been describing for us. I just want to ask you to kindly remind our viewers, because we haven't talked about the White Helmets in the world news as much in recent years as we did, say, when the White Helmets were founded a decade ago. Just remind us what the role and the mandate of the White Helmets actually is.
Yeah, the White Helmets are are the white helmets are the first responders, actually. In the simple words, are the first responders that they respond to the attacks to search and save the people from under the rubble. Our main and primary task that save people, putting out the fire, providing medical care and the first aid for the injured, transporting to the hospitals. And now we have secondary tasks to open roads, rehabilitation, the roads, improving the infrastructure, as we did in northwest Syria. We ordinary people, we volunteered 10 years ago to help our people, and that's what we are doing over the past decade.
Okay, and in terms of working with other aid groups and receiving humanitarian support from any other organizations, just tell us who you're coordinating with.
We're coordinating with the local organizations like SAMS, Syrian American Medical Society. We coordinate with the forum, Syrian Forum, which has many NGOs that has different roles in the field, relief, medical support, supporting the education, also all the medical organizations that operate on the ground, because we work together. Like when we transport the injured to the hospital, they provide medical care. When they finish, we need to transport them to the accommodation centers. Those civilians don't want to flee and the organization provide the other things that it's not our task to provide: blankets, food kits, hygiene kits, etc.
Okay, and just specifically with regards to Aleppo, and you mentioned for us there the university hospital being bombed. Your team obviously has worked on that rescue operation. What medical facilities are left functioning in and around Aleppo if that hospital has been damaged, as I assume it has been by the bombardment?
The bad news, all the medical staff in Aleppo city left. The hospitals are closed. There's no medical staff. We are forced to transport the injured people out of Aleppo city to the medical points and the hospitals that are close to the city. So one of the coordination that we work on to coordinate with the medical organization to operate those hospitals that are closed. It's crucial for the civilians. Imagine 2 million people without hospitals. All the bombing, all the tough circumstances, no electricity, no internet, without hospitals.
Okay, and you mentioned that a lot of medical staff have left Aleppo. I'm just wondering whether, more generally, there's been an exodus of people, large numbers of people leaving Aleppo. We've received reports of people fleeing, and I'm just wondering where they're going to.
We don't know. What we know that there is a hospital, and maybe in one of the neighborhoods. We go, we see that the door is closed. No one is there. No one is receiving the sick people, the injured people.
But in terms of where people are going to seek safety, where are people going? Is there anywhere safe in Aleppo, or are they leaving the city?
They're leaving for the north. Everyone who looking for survivor, they drive to the north countryside of Aleppo and Idlib, close to the border. They think the bombing and the clashes would not affect them.
So it sounds like everyone has been taken by surprise by what's happened in northern Syria. And I'm assuming, therefore, that means a lot of people who've stayed in Aleppo are going to have limited supplies. I mean, is that going to be an issue moving forward, people having adequate access to food, medicine, water, those sorts of basic needs?
Right now, the situation is very difficult. No electricity, no internet to communicate with the families. If they need help, if they need to call us, they don't have internet. The people are who operating in Aleppo. They need to communicate with each other. There's no internet. Water, the same thing. Maybe will not be water for some time because there's no electricity. Bread, the bakeries stopped from the very beginning, and people in dire need, to be honest, in dire need to have a bread right now. Maybe the whole city, the whole population in Aleppo city, they need a bread right now. The basics. Imagine about the medicine, about those who have chronic disease. It's a tragedy, actually. It's tragedy.
Okay, and given the situation militarily in the broader region, I mean, is anything getting through? Are any supplies going into Aleppo at this stage?
Until now, there's nothing. Until now, some truck brought some bread to some neighborhoods. That's it.
Okay, so clearly the situation in northern Syria is extremely volatile. The situation in Idlib is also extremely volatile off to the northwest. Are you getting reports that the situation is getting tense or volatile south of Aleppo, for example, towards Hama, which is roughly halfway between Aleppo and Damascus?
I don't have, no one have those from the White Helmet, this information.
Okay.
We don't have.
Okay. And obviously Aleppo hadn't seen any violence, had it, sort of in recent years? Is this the first time Aleppo has been witness to violence in a number of years?
Aleppo was destroyed back in 2016.
Yes, but it's been calm. The situation's been largely calm, hasn't it, up until last week for a number of years?
Yeah, that's right.
Is it fair to say that the conflict had largely been frozen in the north of Syria for the last few years? Has it not really moved too much in the last couple of years?
But there was bombing every day on the countryside of Aleppo and countryside of Idlib, and we recorded many casualties. Maybe this year, before those 4 days, as White Helmet, we recorded more than 900 attacks on the civilians in northwest Syria. Casualties reached 1,000, including 60 people, 67 people were killed, and hundreds of people were injured. The bombing was going on, and everything was tough on the civilians. There was the suicide drones that were attacking the farmers, attacking the civilians who were trying to get to their lands, to farm, and to get livelihood for their children.
Okay, and just lastly, Ismail, I wonder if you could just give us a summary of the main developments in the course of the last 24 hours, just before we let you go.
Let me start from today. Today in Idlib, the death toll reached more than 15 civilians. 8 of them in one of the IDP camps in north of Idlib, and 5 in Idlib, and 2 in Ma'arat Shurin village that is in the south of Idlib, and 2 people died of the attack that attacked the University Hospital of Idlib. Until now, there are bombings, airstrikes on Idlib city. On the other area in Aleppo city, there are bombings. There are bombings on the neighborhoods of Aleppo. Yesterday was a massacre near the University Hospital of Aleppo. They attacked the hospital, and there were some people crowded in there. Among them there were 2 journalists. They were killed, and today also the Assad regime and Russia continued their bombing to the Aleppo city. They targeted Baghdad station which is the one of the neighborhoods in the heart of the city, and 2 other neighborhoods. Until now, we didn't have the information where they targeted by the attacks before the interview that I'm in.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to tell us all about Ismail al-Abdullah from the White Helmets. Thank you very much indeed. Well, that is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, goodbye.
From the White House to Gaza, Kiev to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake and artificial intelligence,
they've got to have a vote and a say.
It's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
my campaign is going very well.
Presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on the Riz Khan Show for empowering conversation.
Дмитрий Анатольевич, спасибо огромное еще раз за гостеприимство и добро пожаловать на Аль-Арабия. Давайте сразу с вами начинаем с таким вопросом. Украина начала использовать дальнобойные оружие, ракеты на территории России. Насколько этот шаг повлияет на ожидаемые переговоры?
Да, безусловно, это то, что произошло. И совершенно очевидно, что это не останется без последствий. И уже не осталось. В вчерашнем заявлении президент нашей страны Владимир Владимирович Путин об этом прямо сказал, что Украина нанесла удар с использованием ракет, произведенных Соединенными Штатами Америки и целым рядом европейских стран, по территории Российской Федерации в рамках тех границ, которые они сами признают. При том, что, естественно, наши границы зафиксированы в нашей Конституции, и мы их рассматриваем иначе. Тем не менее, это все равно меняет ход боестолкновений и того, что происходит, поскольку свидетельствует о том, что блок НАТО и Вашингтон, и другие участники этого альянса, по сути, включились уже не в гибридную, а в полноценную войну против нашей страны. И это не останется без последствий. Это касается, естественно, и переговоров, о которых вы сказали, но до которых еще очень далеко, а подобные события их только отдаляют. Значит, но это касается и общей ситуации. В результате Верховным главнокомандующим было принято решение о ответном ударе, который был нанесен вчера с использованием нового, специально созданного оружия, а именно гиперзвуковой баллистической ракеты, которая была впервые опробована на военном театре военных действий. Значит, и это, естественно, также меняет ход специальной военной операции. Все за этим наблюдали. Значит, как известно, о том, что будет применена баллистическая гиперзвуковая ракета, которую назвали «Орешник», значит, мы проинформировали американцев, поскольку у нас есть такие с ними договоренности и обязательства, чтобы не возникло уже международного конфликта иного масштаба. Вот. Но, тем не менее, имея в виду то, что случилось, это, безусловно, переводит конфликт в стадию гораздо более напряженную. Это эскалация конфликта.
Хочу вас спрашивать однозначно объем ответа России после таких ударов, да, как вчерашний. Настолько будет зависеть от степени разрушений или ракета такого типа, она вообще красной линии для Москвы?
удары озвучали. Да, значит, очевидно абсолютно, что любые удары являются неприемлемыми. Любые удары будут пресекаться. И, собственно, об этом также вчера сказал президент нашей страны, о том, что в ходе ударов, которые были нанесены с использованием американских ракет «Атакмс» по Брянской области, эти ракеты были поражены и своей цели не достигли. Вот. Но, вне всякого сомнения, уже все, что происходит, это переход за любые красные линии. И, собственно, именно поэтому произошло то, что произошло. О чем сказал вчера глава нашего государства, заканчивая свое выступление, проинформировав и военнослужащих, и граждан нашей страны о том, что был нанесен удар гиперзвуковой баллистической ракеты по объектам промышленным на территории Украины. Он закончил свое выступление следующими словами: ответ обязательно будет. Это касается и того, что произошло, и возможной дальнейшей эскалации. Об этом должны призадуматься абсолютно все, кто сегодня нагнетает военную истерию, прежде всего в блоке НАТО, Соединенные Штаты Америки и ряд других государств.
Мы с вами прекрасно понимаем, что переговоры – это дверь, которую можно открыть с двух сторон. Как вы думаете, такой шаг Байдена, я имею в виду, в отношении ракетного удара, это игра на нервах перед переговорами?
Я думаю, что с его стороны это никакая не игра на нервах. Значит, здесь несколько целей. Цель номер один – оставить своему преемнику, которого он не желал, а именно избранному президенту Трампу, максимально тяжелое наследство по Украине. Поскольку всю эту историю развязала демократическая администрация, она несет за это прямую ответственность. Не говоря уже о том, что они истратили сотни миллиардов рублей американских налогоплательщиков на военную кампанию. И кампанию, которая причинила огромный ущерб как экономике Украины, так и принесла большое количество человеческих жертв. Вот он хочет распространить это на новую администрацию, чтобы они получили в максимальной степени тяжелое наследство. Второе, ему нужно сделать еще какие-то дополнительные шаги, которые закрепят его роль в этой всей истории. А с учетом того, что решения эти зачастую носят непоследовательный характер, скорее всего, они продиктованы вот именно сиюминутными такими соображениями. Вот. Я думаю, что ничего другого американская администрация Байдена в уходящем своем режиме преследовать уже не может. Она просто, по сути, играет на эскалацию этого конфликта и на сохранение этого конфликта в будущем, полагая его важным для Соединенных Штатов Америки. А почему, я, может быть, скажу дальше.
Ранее вы заявили несколько раз о возможности покушения на жизнь Трампа, так как он хочет остановить войну. Насколько Москва рассчитывает на Трампа? И рассчитывает ли вообще на него? И какова вероятность быстрого решения проблемы конфликта после возвращения господина Трампа в Белый дом?
Москва ни на кого не рассчитывает. Мы рассчитываем только на свои силы, на чем, опять же, сказал вчера президент, выступая с вот этим посланием в связи с запуском гиперзвуковой ракеты. Мы рассчитываем только на себя. И с точки зрения нашей обороноспособности, с точки зрения судьбы этого конфликта и нашей несомненной победы в этом конфликте, и с точки зрения выстраивания отношений с другими странами. Значит, на новую администрацию в этом смысле мы смотрим с определенными надеждами, потому что исходим из того, что избранный президент Трамп прагматичный человек. Есть еще военно-промышленный комплекс Соединенных Штатов Америки, есть так называемое глубинное государство, Deep State, которое заинтересовано в репродуцировании различных конфликтов по всему миру. Но, тем не менее, значит, это все-таки новая администрация, плюс господин Трамп во всеуслышание заявил, что он будет заниматься прекращением этого конфликта в кратчайшие сроки. А он может это сделать, поскольку все ключи находятся в Вашингтоне. Если Вашингтон и его сателлиты прекратят поставлять оружие на Украину, конфликт закончится.
Дмитрий Анатольевич, очень важный вопрос. Вы постоянно заявляете о том, что Россия готова использовать атомное оружие при необходимости. И вот тут, насколько это реально и серьезно? И вообще, что понимать под необходимостью на сегодняшний день? И как вы думаете, Запад настолько в этом верит?
Здесь, при всей печальности этой темы, мы должны исходить из реалий сложившегося дня. Еще несколько лет назад я бы в это просто не поверил. Это раз. Второе. Ядерное оружие в истории человечества использовала только одна страна. Это Соединенные Штаты Америки. Поэтому пусть они не умничают, когда говорят о угрозе, исходящей от России, а вспомнят свою угрозу и извинятся перед японцами. Они этого никогда не делали. Третье. Значит, использование ядерного оружия в соответствии с нашими доктринальными документами – это крайний вариант. Нам бы очень не хотелось, чтобы это вообще когда-либо произошло. Сумасшедших в руководстве России нет. Президент четко сформулировал свою позицию, когда утвердил новые основы ядерного сдерживания. Там прямо перечислены случаи, когда может наступить ядерный ответ. Но эти случаи есть. И, скажем прямо, в новых основах ядерного сдерживания, основах госполитики по ядерному сдерживанию, порог использования ядерного оружия понижен с учетом тех рисков, которые возникли перед нашей страной. Наша страна находится в состоянии войны, причем со всем западным миром. Вот. И поэтому мы будем исходить из тех документов, которые подписаны главой государства, а решение, конечно, здесь принимает верховный главнокомандующий, то есть президент страны. Риски высокие, но это не означает, что эти риски необратимые. Если блок НАТО встанет на реальную почву, если они прекратят раздувать пожар войны на Украине, этот конфликт можно завершить без всяких издержек для человечества. Во всяком случае, новых издержек.
Дмитрий Анатольевич, вы недавно заявили о том, что одна из основных условий в переговорах – это аннулирование всех санкций против России. Если все-таки Трамп сыграет роль и сможет аннулировать, убрать какое-то количество санкций, то что? Вы же понимаете, что не могут убрать санкции одним разом все вместе? Или это для Москвы тоже красная линия?
Вы знаете, в отношении санкций я скажу следующую вещь, может быть, достаточно неожиданную. Конечно, санкции – это плохо. Мы всегда об этом говорили. Санкции были положены в основу наших переговоров, которые когда-то происходили с Украиной в Стамбуле. О том, что эти санкции должны быть отменены. Но санкции – это обоюдоострое оружие. Во-первых, они бьют не только по России, но и по всему западному миру, особенно по Европе. И по ним бьют сильнее. Во-вторых, санкции нас заставили заняться возрождением целых отраслей российской экономики. И в этом смысле санкции, как это ни странно, играют и свою позитивную роль. Вот даже то место, где мы сегодня разговариваем, да, это предприятие, которое занимается и гражданским, и оборонным производством, но это предприятие в настоящий момент загружено, и оно работает, и создает новые продукты. Продукты как в области гражданского машиностроения, в области гражданского производства, так и продукты в области военного производства, то есть военного сотрудничества и развития военной отрасли. Вот. Поэтому я полагаю, что вряд ли избранный президент, вступивший в должность, сразу поотменяет эти санкции. Тем более, что на ряде санкций, вообще-то, по сути, он в известный период настаивал, во всяком случае, стараясь ограничить наши поставки газа в Европу. Говорил о том, что в Европу нужно поставлять сжиженный природный газ из Америки, что сейчас и происходит. А нашего газа в Европе нет, поэтому европейцы мерзнут, а их производство останавливается. В известном смысле прекращение санкций не в интересах целого ряда отраслей американской экономики. Какими он будет руководствоваться соображениями, я не знаю. Но это действительно необходимо сделать просто для того, чтобы восстановить нормальное экономическое сотрудничество.
Дмитрий Анатольевич, мир очень бы не хотел вернуться в период холодной войны. Но существенный конфликт на сегодняшний день разделил землю. Кто на самом деле на сегодняшний день, на сегодняшний момент является союзниками и друзья России?
Нашими союзниками, нашими друзьями являются те, кто не заявил о том, что Россия наш противник. А это огромное количество стран. Это страны глобального юга, Азии, арабские страны, и очень много других стран. Страны, которые выступают как наши противники, их ограниченное количество. И, скажем прямо, туда попал, по сути, весь западный мир. Но это их решение. Друзей у нас больше.
Должен спросить, потому что я посмотрел новости последние несколько дней. Очень хорошо. На уровне военных экспертов идут дискуссии об ударах по военным хабам на территории Румынии и Польши, если Украина несет еще удары такого рода, как ракетой. Это реально?
Понимаете, в свете того, что происходит сейчас, я, к сожалению, вообще никакой сценарий исключить не могу, даже самый сложный и печальный. Нам бы не хотелось такого сценария. Об этом мы все неоднократно говорили. И, опять же, отталкиваясь от того заявления, которое вчера сделал президент России, мы настроены на установление мира. Но установление мира должно учитывать в полном объеме интересы России. Вот именно то, о чем мы всегда говорили и будем на этом настаивать. Что же касается конкретных военных объектов, баз там, в любой из государств, в настоящий момент, если конфликт будет развиваться по эскалационному сценарию, невозможно исключить ничего, поскольку государства, входящие в НАТО, по сути, в полной мере включились в этот конфликт. Они должны понимать, что они воюют на стороне Украины. Причем воюют не только поставляя им оружие и предоставляя им финансовые средства. Они воюют напрямую, потому что они дают цели на территории России и управляют действиями американских или европейских ракет. Они воюют с Российской Федерацией. А раз это так, исключить нельзя ничего.
At Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
Дмитрий Анатольевич, как вы думаете, как будет развиваться ситуация на Ближнем Востоке?
Ближний Восток – это еще одна нынешняя горячая точка на планете, которая возникла давно и, к сожалению, где совсем не видно просветов на протяжении десятилетий. Я имею в виду, естественно, Палестино-израильский конфликт. Вы знаете позицию Российской Федерации. Мы всегда исходили за неуклонное и полное исполнение основополагающих конвенций Организации Объединенных Наций. Конвенции 1947 года и ряда последующих конвенций о создании двух государств и их мирном сосуществовании. Но на самом деле ситуация очень тяжелая, а государства, которые реально могут оказать влияние на этот конфликт, к сожалению, своими обязанностями манкируют. Эти обязанности не исполняют. Я имею в виду, опять же, прежде всего Соединенные Штаты Америки, которые, на мой взгляд, не заинтересованы в разрешении этого конфликта, а заинтересованы в его поддержании на контролируемом уровне. Ровно поэтому они не вмешиваются в то, что происходит сейчас. А сейчас происходит трагедия.
Как вы могли комментировать решение МУС в отношении руководства Израиля?
Ну, вы знаете, наше отношение к Международному уголовному суду. Мы вообще-то в России этот суд не признаем, считаем его нелегитимным. Он не вправе рассматривать споры или обвинять кого-то, если это государство не подписало Римский статут Международного уголовного суда, то есть не присоединилось к нему. По принципам международного права мы исходим из того, что мы должны исполнять решения и считаем для себя обязательными только те решения, которые основаны на международном праве. Мы этот статут не подписали. Государства, которые его подписали, по всей вероятности, будут исполнять те или иные решения. Но мне будет очень любопытно посмотреть, каким образом это решение будет интерпретировано в Соединенных Штатах Америки, потому что уже отдельные должностные лица выступили и сказали, что это решение возмутительное. По отношению к другим решениям Международного уголовного суда я что-то таких реплик из Вашингтона не слышал, а здесь они уже отметились. Поэтому вот наше отношение к решению МУС именно следующее. МУС мы не признаем, но с интересом наблюдаем за тем, каким образом это решение будет интерпретировано в Европе, а самое главное в Соединенных Штатах Америки.
Дмитрий Анатольевич, как вы бы оценили отношения между Россией и Саудовской Аравией и с арабским миром в целом?
Ну, между Россией и Саудовской Аравией очень добрые, дружественные отношения, и мы рассчитываем, что так было, так есть и так будет. Об этом свидетельствует, кстати, и диалог на высшем уровне. Совсем недавно состоялся телефонный разговор между президентом нашей страны Владимиром Путиным и наследным принцем и премьер-министром Саудовской Аравии Мухаммедом бен Сальманом Аль-Саудом. И регулярный контакт между лидерами стран, он, безусловно, должен поддерживаться на необходимом уровне. Мы ценим и наши взаимоотношения на энергетическом треке. Я имею в виду вот все наши консультации, которые у нас ведутся по нефтяной проблематике. И мне кажется, это позволяет сохранять в целом стабильность на нефтяном рынке. Это достаточно важно для всей планеты. Ну и у нас развиваются отношения по самому разному кругу других вопросов, как экономических, так и культурных. Так что мы весьма позитивно относимся к отношениям Саудовской Аравии, как и с другими странами арабского мира. Потому что исторически между Советским Союзом когда-то и Российской Федерацией, как правопреемницей Советского Союза, всегда между нашими странами, между арабским миром в целом и нашей страной существовали добрые, дружеские отношения, по сути. Мы много помогали в определенный период целому ряду стран просто развиваться. Исходим из того, что и дальше так будет. Не видим здесь никаких препятствий. Как раз в арабском мире живут наши друзья.
Hong Kong. Situated in the eastern region of China's Pearl River is Hong Kong. Its name roughly translates to fragrant harbor, as the city's natural geographic features make it an ideal water port. Hong Kong greatly embodies the Chinese concept of yin and yang, a balance of contrasting features. It's a modern city with a beautiful skyline, but at the same time, Hong Kong's roots are deeply rooted in rich Chinese and Buddhist cultures. Go urban and visit the cityscape for the biggest shopping malls and the best in modern architecture that the city has to offer, or take it slow by visiting the many age-old Buddhist and Confucian temples around Hong Kong. Because of its British colonial history, Hong Kong is also a veritable melting pot of East meets West cultures in Asia. You'll see that this is especially evident in the contrasting architectural marvels around the city. Hong Kong is considered as one of the international hubs in the region and is home to the biggest international companies operating in Asia. Hong Kong is also a food lover's paradise. Whether it's big fancy dining like Hong Kong's award-winning Tim Ho Wan, or just your hole-in-the-wall food stop, there's bound to be something for you. Of course, no visit is ever complete without some must-see destinations. If you're going to Hong Kong, don't forget to check out the Tan Tian Buddha, a giant 112-foot bronze statue depicting Buddha, which is located in Hong Kong's Lantau Island. The Star Ferry Harbor Tour, a short 11-minute ferry across the Hong Kong harbor. Tickets are cheap, and the ferry schedule is set throughout the day. It's a great way to catch a glimpse of the Hong Kong skyline. For those eager for the Hong Kong nightlife scene, Lan Kwai Fong is a place to be. Boasting of over 90 establishments catering to food and entertainment, Lan Kwai Fong is also known to attract local and foreign celebrities. And of course, let's not forget shopping. Hong Kong's famous Temple Street Night Market is a bargain hunter's dream. Everything from fashion, electronics, toys, and souvenirs are here.
Our journey of the history of Arab manuscripts has taken us to the Far East, China, and the year 105 AD. A Chinese inventor named Tsai Lun created a unique way of producing paper. He used worn rags, old ropes, and tree bark to produce paper. This paper would be known as al-Kaghid. The Chinese inventor Tsai Lun prepared the first paste used to make paper from woven fabric. He sliced it up and mixed it with water, and then he would press the water out. He also prepared paste for paper out of hemp pulp, bamboo, and mulberry bark. The Japanese also used natural products to make paper. There are many stories about how paper arrived to Arab countries. However, most of them overlap with the possibility that in the summer of 134 Hijri, the Arabs captured some Chinese people in one of their battles in Central Asia and took them to Samarkand. These Chinese individuals knew how to make paper, and they taught the Arabs. Al-Kaghid is an Arabized word for paper. It is said to be a Persian word of origin, and there is a possibility that it is a Chinese word in origin. The manufacturing of Kaghid paper was very meticulous and took several days to finalize. White hemp, which is a fibrous plant, would have its threads and fibers extracted from its bark to manufacture paper. The hemp would be soaked in water, then combed down with a brush until it softens. Lime water is then added, which involves using a white substance prepared by heating limestones in special kilns. It is then left to cool and have the water drained from it. The water is used to soak the hemp for several nights. The soft fibers are pressed and placed under the sun to dry. At night, the fibers are returned to the lime water once again, and left again till the morning to be pressed once again. This process goes on for 3 or more nights, till the fibers whiten. They would replace the lime water twice a day. After the fibers would dry, they were cut with specialized tools. They were then soaked in fresh water for 7 days. And this water would be changed daily until the lime water residue would wash out. The fibers would be pressed delicately in a mortar and pestle, or moist, until they flattened out, and there were no knots left. The paste would be dissolved in a bit of clean water until it became similar to fine silk. Special wooden molds were made for the paper, depending on the requests of those who ordered them to be made. And it would contain many holes. The mold would be covered in water, and the paste would be placed on the mold. And it would be evened out by hand to have an equal thickness throughout the mold. The mold is inverted onto a wet wooden board, which it would stick to, and it would be left to dry until it would fall off on its own. The wooden board would be sprinkled with water, and once it dried up slightly, the first side of the paper would be coated with a hemp mixture. The first side is placed on a wooden board, and the other side is coated in the same manner. When soaking and starching al-kaghed paper, they would use rice starch after boiling and cooking it in a clean pot, draining it with a clean cloth, and using it to soak the paper. The more the process was repeated, the more aged and refined the paper would become. To color paper, they would add saffron to the starch solution, pour it into a bowl, and then gently dip the paper into the solution so that it would not crumble. The paper would then be dried on a fine thread in a shady area and flipped several times until it dries. It is finally polished with a glass polisher. This paper would be finally ready to be used. Paper is characterized by being lightweight, small in size, portable, and affordable. These factors made it a mainstay of expressing intellectual findings and thought. It was used in the art of calligraphy, especially in the Islamic East. All of this made al-kaghed paper a strong competitor to papyrus and parchment. The Abbasid Caliph Harun al-Rashid ordered that people only write on al-kaghed paper, and that was because leathers were capable of being erased and reused, which made them susceptible to forgery. This is contrary to paper, which would be ruined if someone tried to erase something off of it. If a person tried to scrape or rub off something, then markings would be evident. In addition to its other advantages, paper was widely used in writing manuscripts. Despite the use of parchment attempting to hold on to its relevancy, it became one of the tools of scholars, commoners, students of knowledge, writers, merchants, paper makers, and those of prestige and power. Al-Jahiz said the following about paper: "It is sufficient for a person to carry a little bit of paper with their belongings and provisions due to how lightweight and small it is, unlike leather, which is heavier. If a person wanted to carry enough to last the duration of their travels, it would not suffice to carry a camel's worth." The Egyptian publishing house has one of the earliest books to be copied onto paper. It is a manuscript titled The Risala in Fiqh by al-Shafi'i, and it dates back to the beginning of the 3rd century Hijri. The oldest Arab manuscript written on paper, according to the latest data, is the Etiquette of Philosophy by the writer Hunayn bin Ishaq, who passed away in the year 260 Hijri. This manuscript is still preserved in the library of the University of Tehran, and it dates back to 249 Hijri. With the increase in demand for paper, the number of centers that produced it increased, and it was no longer confined to Samarkand or Baghdad. The paper industry reached Transoxiana, the Levant and Damascus, Tiberias, and Tripoli. Samarkand remained a central hub for the production of paper, and they continue to produce the finest and most premium types of paper. This new human invention and the drive Arabs had to produce it led to many forms of paper being developed, including al-Sulaymani, al-Talhi, al-Nuhi, al-Faruni, al-Jafari, and al-Tahri. All of these names were given in relation to the governor of the city in which the paper was made. The development of the paper industry, especially al-Kaghid, and its spread throughout Islamic countries, invigorated the production of written artworks and authorship, and helped it transcend into a new era. It was accompanied by a development in the markets of papermaking, scribes, calligraphy, and calligraphers. All of this changed the course of Arab manuscripts as they were elevated to a level with increased competition after the diversification and growth of this world that is full of art and intellectual creativity. This made us delve further into exploring the depths of our manuscripts to stand at the tools of the greats of our history as they explored, mastered, and created.
From the White House to Gaza, Kiev to Beijing, elections, economics, and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake, and artificial intelligence,
They've got to have a vote and a say.
it's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
presidents, prime ministers, princes, and peacemakers,